Chapter 15. The Soul of the Cosmos. You could not discover the limits of the soul, even if you travelled by every path in order to do so. So profound is its meaning. Heraclitus. I feel more and more every day, as my imagination strengthens, that I do not live in this world alone, but in 1,000 worlds. John Keats, letter 18th of October, 1818. The moment when physics touches on the untrodden, untreadable regions, and when psychology has at the same time to admit that there are other forms of psychic life besides the acquisitions of personal consciousness, then the intermediate realm of subtle bodies comes to life again, and the physical and the psychic are once more blended in an indissoluble unity. We have come very near to this turning point today. Carl Gustav Jung, Psychology and Alchemy. There is an exquisite tapestry in the Musée de Cluny in Paris, where a woman stands in the doorway of a tent, flanked by a lion and a unicorn. The artist who designed this 15th century masterpiece, discovered in a remote chateau in the Auvergne, placed them in a russet landscape filled with fruit trees, animals, birds, and flowers. The series of 5 tapestries called La Dame à la Licorne, to which this one belongs, is said to represent the 5 senses. However, to me they represent far more than this. In medieval iconography, the lion symbolized the body, and the unicorn the spirit. Here both are held, so to speak, in the field of the soul, personified by the beautiful woman who stands at the door of a tent, emblazoned with fleur-de-lis. A young girl offers her a casket filled with jewels. Above the entrance of the tent are inscribed the words, "Ah, mon seul désir." 2 posts or lances on either side of her are painted with crescent moons, and display a banner with 3 crescent moons on them. They may represent a coat of arms, but they are also the age-old symbol of the feminine. It seems to me that this beautiful woman could represent the soul as the essential and long-obscured link between body and spirit. The soul has been described in languages other than English with feminine nouns. The Oxford Dictionary describes the soul as an entity distinct from the body, as the spiritual aspect of man in contrast to the physical aspect, as the seat of the emotions and feelings, and as the aspect of our nature which survives physical death. Metaphysically, it was regarded as the vital, sensitive, or rational principle in plants, animals, or human beings. But millennia ago, it was regarded as the animating principle of the world, the invisible containing reality, which underlies and permeates all forms. The anima mundi. The current concept of the soul in modern reductionist science is revealed in the title of a debate, October the 30th, 2011, called Battle of Ideas, and subtitled, Is There a Ghost in the Machine? The description of the subject of the debate began with this paragraph. The spirit, spark, or personality, the concept of a soul, self, or mind, distinct from our physical shell, has long been a cornerstone of our understanding of what it means to be human in both religious and secular spheres. Increasingly, however, scientific fields such as neuroscience, genetics, epigenetics, and psychology continue to provide ever more intricate explanations for human functioning that are rooted in the tangible and the biological. There is a widespread expectation that aspects of our lives that currently elude understanding will eventually yield to scientific explication given time and research. Jung's comment is perhaps appropriate here. The general undervaluation of the human soul is so great that neither the great religions nor the philosophies nor scientific rationalism have been willing to look at it twice. What has been lost in descriptions of the soul is the Platonic understanding that the cosmos has a soul, and that this cosmic soul is the origin or ground of our own individual soul, our own consciousness, and our connection with the deeper levels of the cosmos. Our individual soul is an inseparable part of the soul of the cosmos. To understand the soul as an invisible cosmic reality We need to broaden our concept of it to embrace the inner or unseen life of the universe, and following what was explained in the last chapter, recognize that it is alive, conscious, and the eternal ground of our own consciousness. The reason the soul has been thought of as feminine is, I believe, because the idea of the soul evolved out of the image of the Great Mother, the matrix of being, whose cosmic womb was the source of all life. One of the most important ideas derived from the image of the Great Mother, described in the preface to the Myth of the Goddess and in chapter 4 of this book, was that life was instinctively experienced as an organic, living, and sacred whole, where everything was woven together in one cosmic web, and all orders of life were related, because all shared in the sanctity of the original source. The Neolithic image of the Great Mother was transmitted to the great goddesses of the Bronze Age, specifically in Egypt to the goddesses Isis and Hathor, as described in chapter 4. In Greece, it eventually gave rise to Plato's definition of the soul of the cosmos, psyche tou kosmou, and to the eloquent image of Zoe, the universal soul, and Bios, the individual soul, the tiny, pulsing atom of our consciousness hung like a bead on the great necklace of being. Later, the idea of soul as a cosmic reality was defined in the extensive cosmology of Plotinus and his idea of the anima mundi, or soul of the world. A similar concept can be found in the Shekinah of Kabbalah, described in chapter 3. Familiarity with the ancient cosmology surrounding the image of the Great Mother and later great goddesses, as well as the Shekinah, helped me to understand what the idea of soul once signified, and what it could signify again. Heraclitus was surely right. Even though we travel by every path to discover the limits of the soul, we could never fathom its depths. For the depths of the soul are the depths of the cosmos itself, and the multitude of invisible worlds about which, with our limited perception, we know virtually nothing.
When I was gathering sayings for the mystic vision, I came across a book called The Story of My Heart by Richard Jefferies, 1848 to 1887, who lived in the Dorset countryside in the late 19th century. To me, there has never been a more beautiful or eloquent hymn to the soul, which at the same time is a hymn to the beauty and marvel of the earth. I was amazed and moved to discover these words in his diary.
There is an entity, a soul entity as yet unrecognized. It is in addition to the existence of the soul, in addition to immortality and beyond the idea of deity. There is an immense ocean over which the mind can sail, upon which the vessel of thought has not yet been launched. There is much beyond all that has ever yet been imagined.
In another passage, he expressed his longing for relationship with this soul entity.
I was utterly alone with the sun and the earth. Lying down on the grass, I spoke in my soul to the earth, the sun, the air, and the distant sea far beyond sight. I thought of the earth's firmness. I felt it bear me up. Through the grassy couch there came an influence as if I could feel the great earth speaking to me. Touching the crumble of earth, the blade of grass, the thyme flower, breathing the earth-encircling air, thinking of the sea and the sky, holding out my hand for the sunbeams to touch it, prone on the sward in token of deep reverence. Thus I prayed that I might reach the unutterable existence, infinitely higher than deity.
His words convey two concepts of soul, the first being the personal one, traditionally thought of as feminine, which is the spiritual core of our being, that aspect of ourselves which is our conduit to an unseen spiritual reality, and that he believed to survive the death of our body. But there is also the wider cosmic one that Jefferies calls a soul entity and compares to an immense ocean. This wider concept of soul embraces the life of the cosmos and its billions of galaxies, as well as the life of our planet and every stone, plant, and creature on it. It is this older concept of soul, the hidden source and ground of all life, which has been overlooked, forgotten, or dismissed by our culture. Jeffries was yearning for something that people once felt they belonged to, in whose invisible life they lived. Over the millennia of the solar era, this instinctive feeling of belonging to an entity beyond the community of tribe or nation, something experienced as numinous, immeasurable, and all-embracing, filled with the demonic agents of the divine, was gradually lost, and with it the sense of participation in a web of life which connected every single creature and element of life to every other. Great contemplatives of Kabbalah named this web the Tree of Life. Without my vision of the cosmic woman and my discovery of Kabbalah, I would never have come to know that the soul is not in us, we are in the soul. Many years after that visionary dream, another one helped me to understand the intimate connection between our world and the greater world of soul. I dreamed that I came to a place where there was a large flat stone on the ground, with a kind of fence or barrier extending horizontally from it on both sides. Lying on top of the stone was something that I had to bend down to see properly. It was a beautifully worked red enamel and gold buckle, whose two ends fitted together precisely. In appearance, it was like the exquisite enamelled buckles found in the Sutton Hoo burial chamber and now in the British Museum. As I looked up, I saw a different landscape extending beyond the fence and far into the distance in front of me. I realized that the buckle in the dream was giving me an image of how two realities fit together to form a whole. I was standing in one reality, could see clearly into another that was similar to the one familiar to me, but infinitely more beautiful and extraordinary.
The Net of Indra. In India and China, there has long been an exquisite image of the cosmic web of life known as the Net of Indra, king of the gods in the Vedic pantheon. This jewel, diamond or pearl-studded net, delicate as a silken spider's web, was said to be suspended over Indra's palace on Mount Meru, the holy mountain, and axis mundi of Vedic cosmology, that I had found represented everywhere in temple sculpture on my journeys through India, Cambodia, and Indonesia. The Buddha himself once described the cosmos as a web of golden threads joining myriad many-faceted jewels, each reflecting the multi-hued light of all the others. The jewels or pearls represent the souls of animate beings, and each jewel holds a boundless universe of images and experiences, since all souls carry a fathomless past and are connected to each other through the net. The image of Indra's net led me ultimately, near the end of writing this book, to a Buddhist text called the Avatsamsaka Sutra, or Flower Ornament Scripture, and to Huayan Buddhism, regarded by Chinese and Japanese scholars as the highest form of Buddhism. Legend says that the teaching given within was spoken by the Buddha when he was in the state of samadhi at the time of his enlightenment. Francis Cook, in his book Huayan Buddhism, 1977, gives us this description of Indra's net. Far away, in the heavenly abode of the great god Indra, there is a wonderful net which has been hung by some cunning artificer in such a manner that it stretches out indefinitely in all directions. The artificer has hung a single glittering jewel in each eye of the net. And since the net itself is infinite in dimensions, the jewels are infinite in number. There hang the jewels, glittering like stars of the first magnitude, a wonderful sight to behold. If we arbitrarily select one of these jewels for inspection and look closely at it, we will discover that in its polished surface there are reflected all the other jewels in the net, infinite in number. Not only that, but each of the jewels reflected in this one jewel is also reflecting all the other jewels, so that there is an infinite reflecting process occurring. The Avatamsaka Sutra was originally written in Sanskrit, then translated into Chinese between the 6th and 8th centuries, where it formed the basis of a Chinese Buddhist school called Huayan, or Flower Ornament School, incorporating elements of both Mahayana Buddhism and Taoism. In an outstanding work of scholarship and years of dedication, Thomas Cleary has translated all 39 books of the Sutra into English, and these were published with an introduction by him in 1993. The whole extraordinary text of the Avatamsaka Sutra, the quintessence of centuries of Buddhist contemplation and meditation, might be said to describe the nature and significance of the net of Indra. Its essential message is that all of existence, both seen and unseen, is an indissoluble unity. Nothing can exist separately from anything else. All aspects of life are interdependent, and each interacts with the others in a state of continual flux, change, and creativity. The great Buddhist scholar D.T. Suzuki considered the Avatamsaka Sutra to be the consummation of Buddhist thought, Buddhist sentiment, and Buddhist experience. To my mind, no religious literature in the world can ever approach the grandeur of conception, the depth of feeling, and the gigantic scale of composition as attained by this sutra. Abstract truths are so concretely, so symbolically represented here, that one will finally come to a realization of the truth that even in a particle of dust, the whole universe is seen reflected. Not this visible universe only, but a vast system of universes, conceivable by the highest minds only. Whereas in the Western tradition the concept of the visible universe was predicated on the idea of a primal cause or a creator God bringing it into being, in this text the universe has no beginning and no end, no creator or hierarchical order, but is seen as an immeasurable living entity or cosmic web of relationships existing in a kind of unified field, with each aspect integral to and affecting every other. It describes a universe beyond our time and space world, one undoubtedly seen in meditation. All life is perceived as an organic whole, just as it was conceived in the lunar goddess cultures and is conceived in indigenous cultures today. All lives and elements of life are eternally and inseparably interwoven with all others, participating in mutual relationship with all others, dependent upon that jeweled or pearl-studded net of relationships that are ceaselessly changing, ceaselessly coming into being. Everything we do in our lives affects this unimaginable web, whether for good or for ill. The net of Indra may be aligned with the concept of the universe as a hologram, where every tiny part reflects or contains an image of the whole, a concept put forward by the physicist David Bohm in his book Wholeness and the Implicate Order, described in the last chapter. Today we are discovering this network of relationships in James Lovelock's concept of Gaia as a vast living organism where each part is dependent upon every other part for its survival. What is to prevent us widening his discovery to include the whole universe? In the opening paragraph of his book, Francis Crick says that Western man may be on the brink of an entirely new understanding of the nature of existence. Although this Buddhist view of reality may seem unfamiliar to us, it is becoming more familiar as science discovers the interconnected nature of all aspects of life, and how one single electron is connected to all others, no matter how great the distance between them. Science has looked at things in isolation as separate units, but now it is discovering that life is a web of interdependent elements, where something as unremarkable as a bear eating salmon and discarding its remains in the Canadian forest can nourish the life of the trees growing there and the animals feeding on the vegetation on the forest floor. If one element is damaged or destroyed, the whole web is affected. Therefore, it is incumbent on us as individuals to take care of and cherish every aspect of life, aware that the least of our actions, whether in relation to our immediate families, to society as a whole, or to the great web of life in nature, has an effect on the whole. As Cook observed in the concluding paragraph of his book, speaking from the Huayan perspective, I am, in some sense, boundless, my being encompassing the farthest limits of the universe, touching and moving every atom in existence. The interfusion, the sharing of destiny, is as infinite in scope as the reflections in the jewel of Indra's net. It is not just that we are all in it together. We are it, rising or falling as one living body. The legacy of Plato and Plotinus. Returning to the Western metaphysical tradition, no description of the cosmic dimension of soul can disregard the immensely influential legacy of two of the greatest philosophers of the Greek world, Plato, 429 to 347 BC, and Plotinus, AD 205 to 270, a philosopher who was born in Hellenistic Egypt and later moved to Rome, where he had a wide circle of students. We are fortunate that one of his students, Porphyry, edited the huge body of his teachings known as the Enneads that formed the basis of what came to be known as Neoplatonism. Through the influence of Plato and Plotinus, the idea of a cosmic soul and a world soul was transmitted down the centuries by individuals who valued the Platonic ideas and their insights, and is coming to life again today. Their enduring influence is manifest in the words of the Sufi Sheikh Llewellyn Vaughan Lee in his book The Return of the Feminine and the World Soul. The world soul is not just a psychological or philosophical concept. It is a living spiritual substance within us and around us. Just as the individual soul pervades the whole human being, our body, thoughts, and feelings, the nature of the world soul is that it is present within everything. It pervades all of creation and is a unifying principle within the world. Plotinus, who developed and clarified Plato's cosmology, said that we were within a reality that is also within us. All things depend on each other. Everything breathes together. His concept of the totally transcendent one as the divine ground of being, emanating through the levels and dimensions of cosmic life in the way the sun radiates light until the world of matter comes into being, is remarkably similar to the cosmology of Kabbalah. As in that tradition, the individual human soul is the expression or emanation of the divine ground of the cosmic or world soul, and carries divinity within its very nature. In the 12th century, the works of Plato became accessible in France through the translations of Arab philosophers, and gave rise to the marvel of the Gothic cathedrals. Soul comes to life in the medieval quest for the Holy Grail, image of the boundless realm of the eternal pouring forth its light and love for the nourishment of humanity. Later, in 15th century Italy, with the translation of the works of Plato by the Florentine philosopher Marsilio Ficino, the idea of a cosmic or world soul and the quintessential divinity of man were revived. Within a small but influential circle of individuals, nature was again perceived as ensouled, and this released a tremendous creative energy in one small part of Europe. Yet these ideas could not take root and flourish. The young Pico della Mirandola gave his great oration on the dignity of man, but was murdered before he could accomplish the dream he shared with Marsilio Ficino of bringing together the teaching of Kabbalah with that of Christianity. A little over a century later, Giordano Bruno, one of the most innovative and creative philosophers of his time, was sent to the stake in Rome in 1600 for declaring that nature was ensouled, that the world soul illumined the universe, and that there were other solar systems inhabited by living beings. Even in the midst of the turbulence of the 17th century, The presence of soul as the unseen ground of this material world still shines through the words of the visionary poet Thomas Traherne, 1637 to 1674, in his Centuries of Meditations. The world is a mirror of infinite beauty, yet no man sees it. It is a temple of majesty, yet no man regards it. It is a region of light and peace. Did not men disquiet it? It is the paradise of God. The corn was orient and immortal wheat, which never could be reaped, nor ever was sown. I thought it had stood from everlasting to everlasting. The dust and the stones of the street were as precious as gold. The gates were at first the end of the world. The green trees, when I saw them first through one of the gates, transported and ravished me. Their sweetness and unusual beauty made my heart to leap, and almost mad with ecstasy, they were such strange and wonderful things. You will never enjoy the world aright till the sea itself floweth in your veins, till you are clothed with the heavens and crowned with the stars, and perceive yourself to be the sole heir of the whole world, and more, because men are in it who are every one sole heirs as well as you, till your spirit fills the whole world, and the stars are your jewels. After the turmoil and terrible slaughter of the religious wars of the 17th century, soul comes to life again in the work of the great poets of the Romantic movement, Wordsworth, Keats, Shelley, Coleridge, and later Tennyson, Goethe, and the German poets of the 19th century, who reconnected their culture to nature and the imagination. Blake could see that everything that lives is holy, but their vision fades before the tremendous social, economic, and technological changes wrought by the industrial and scientific revolutions. Earlier chapters have explored the difference between lunar and solar culture, and shown how the perception of the cosmos as a living being was lost during the solar era, and how our self-aware, rational mind gradually became dissociated from the deeper, instinctive ground out of which it had developed. They have shown how, through the great meta-narrative of the fall of man, nature and this world became desacralized, and woman and all that was related to the feminine deeply wounded because of their association with nature, a nature that was split off from spirit and seen as part of a fallen world. From the 4th century, the powerful influence of St. Augustine and his profoundly pessimistic doctrine of original sin severed humanity from the ground of soul by imposing on the Christian community the belief that this world was fundamentally flawed and man contaminated by sin and separated from God, from which state only those who were predestined would be rescued by the grace of God. Although there were many other factors contributing to the loss of the wider concept of soul, for many centuries this Christian doctrine drastically undermined the older, lunar, participatory experience of life, and, in my view, led ultimately to the current philosophy of scientific reductionism and the loneliness and alienation of man in an apparently inanimate and indifferent universe. Soul as the fathomless sea of being. From my dreams and from Jung's invaluable discoveries, I know that the sea is one of the primary images of the soul, that mysterious sea so difficult to find, so incomprehensible to the mind conditioned to believe that there is only material reality. That is why the I Ching, or Chinese Book of Oracles, enjoins us to cross the great waters. No one has ever referred to the sea as he. The sea has always been associated with the feminine principle and with the image of a goddess, with Kuan Yin and the Virgin Mary of the Christian West, and long before these with Namu, the Sumerian goddess of the primordial abyss. For millennia, sailors invoked their protection when they set out in their frail vessels across the dark immensity of the sea. But transpose the image of the sea to the measureless sea of cosmic soul, and imagine the small vessel of an infinite sea of light, which is sailing on the surface of an infinite sea of light, which is continually surging, dancing, flowing into being. Imagine that we could see through the physical forms, including our own bodies, which we experience as opaque and solid, and were able to see myriad patterns of energy interacting with each other and connecting us with the subtle worlds of the soul. Imagine shining filaments of light, invisible to us, flowing through the starry galaxies of space as well as through our bodies, and the forms of the animals, plants, trees, and the landscape we see around us. We experience ourselves as separate entities, but if the whole universe is one integrated living organism, one symphony of cosmic sound, then we are part of that whole. How do we ever come to believe that the universe and matter are inanimate and dead? This cosmic web of life is an inconceivably complex, multi-leveled network of dimensions nested within dimensions, with information continually being exchanged between these dimensions, perhaps comparable to the way we now exchange information through websites and emails. At the molecular level, at the level of our own telepathic communication with each other, at the level of planetary life, and at the level of galaxies and perhaps any number of parallel universes, of which as yet we know nothing. In this invisible soul of the universe is encoded the experience of all orders of life over billions of years as we measure time. We participate as creators in the unfolding of our own lives, in this fathomless unfolding evolutionary process. But the potential for limitless creation is also there, and we participate in that ongoing process of creation. We may inhabit one of these worlds or dimensions after our death, when our physical body has been discarded. What we call our consciousness is infinite, yet paradoxically as small as the lens through which we try to fathom that immeasurable greatness. How recent a development is our present consciousness in comparison with the age of the universe, even with the age of our planet? How difficult then for us to encompass the meaning of the soul? If we were to ask ourselves the question put long ago by the great Indian sage Sri Ramana, who am I? The answer would be, I am the soul of the cosmos discovering itself through its own creation. In our modern culture, we are usually so completely absorbed in what the Taoists called the 10,000 things, that it may never occur to us that the longing we may experience to set out on journeys, to sail across the seas or explore foreign lands, might reflect the soul's own longing to be explored, to reveal to us, in the words of an Old Testament prophet, the treasures of darkness and the hidden riches of secret places. Isaiah chapter 45, verse 3. The soul may be calling to us, but we may unknowingly ignore the foundation on which the whole edifice of life rests. Reconnecting with the soul. There is a voice, that of myth, fairy tale and legend, and also of mystic vision, which points inwards, leading us, if we will allow it, into the neglected dimension of our inner life, our soul, which in turn connects us to the greater soul of the cosmos. In its simplest terms, the soul is the secret hidden dimension, that is the goal of the hero's quest in myth and legend. It is the ultimate destination of all exploration, the unknown, mysterious, fabulous land. The way to it lies through the mysterious gates of horn, so celebrated in the ancient world, the gates that guarded the threshold to the mysteries of the goddess. In the language of mythology and fairy tale, it has been named the kingdom of fairy, the realm of the gods. In the language of visionary revelation, it is the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, the sacred ground of all cosmic reality. The Sufis know it as Alam al-Mital, or what the great Sufi scholar Henry Corbin described as the imaginal world, mundus imaginalis, a world that is as real, alive, and present as our world. It is the ground or source of everything we are, everything we perceive. It is our true home in the cosmos to which we return after our sojourn on earth. If the soul is all this, it is not surprising that it transcends our present level of consciousness, that we cannot comprehend it after a few hours or years of search and study. Yet, paradoxically, we are both that which seeks to comprehend and the object of our comprehension. We are both part and whole. What connects us to the invisible ground of the soul? It is the quest for meaning, experienced differently in each individual life, which drives our longing to discover, create, explore, know, and understand. But above all, it is our capacity to imagine, to make intuitive associations, to bring things together that have been fragmented and are felt to belong together. It is through our capacity to feel and to imagine that we are most closely connected to the soul of nature and the cosmos. It is developing the ability to see with the eye of the heart, often spoken of by poets and artists, that makes the connection with reality initially beyond the reach of the mind, acting like a plug connecting us to the socket of that deeper reality. People sometimes dream of being in a house with rooms they had no idea existed, or find themselves going through a door into an unknown part of it. The soul can be thought of as a stranger in whose house we live, but whom we have never met. This stranger has been the witness of everything experienced since the beginning of our evolution, as well as holding everything that is still latent as an unrealized potential. The greater consciousness to which our own consciousness belongs, though still unaware of its parentage, is the basic energy of life which creates, destroys, and perpetually transforms itself. Its cosmic imagination has brought forth the universe, the galaxies, our planet, the evolutionary process on the planet that has ultimately given us physical form, and the self-aware creativity, intelligence, and imagination which have transformed the physical and cultural conditions of our life on Earth. The idea of meeting this stranger may seem faintly ridiculous at first, even somewhat alarming. The soul speaks an unfamiliar language, like the language of hieroglyphs, whose symbols have to be painstakingly learned before we can understand their meaning. As the ability develops to become aware of what it is trying to communicate, to sense its presence and divine its intentions and guidance, it begins to come alive. A dialogue develops. Synchronicities occur which were not previously noticed. Understanding the symbolic imagery of dreams can help to build this relationship. But there are also the insights that have become available to us through the painstaking work of pioneers who have opened up for us this unexplored dimension. Jung developed the method that he called active imagination to enter into dialogue with the soul. Meditation can help to give us access to the underlying ground that is obscured by the continual stream of concerns and anxieties which may distract us from awareness of its presence. Silence and contemplation are essential if we are to create the space for listening in our over-busy lives. I remember that the Maharishi said that meditation is like being dipped into a vat filled with golden dye. Eventually, after many dippings, we begin to take on a rich golden hue. What one individual experiences and understands affects the whole. As he suggested, and as Rupert Sheldrake's hypothesis of morphic fields would seem to confirm, once a critical mass is reached, there can be a shift in collective consciousness, a collective awakening. Sacred places. The idea that our world rests on the ground of an invisible other survived in the visionary and mystical traditions of the Solar Age, which kept alive the lunar idea of the divinity of nature and the co-inherence of matter and spirit. It also survived in some of the close-knit indigenous communities of the world, where the traditions which respected the sacredness of earth and cosmos and the methods of opening a connection with the inner dimension were passed from generation to generation, even to the present day. All over the world, pilgrimages are still made to places held sacred for millennia, because they act as portals which connect the two worlds. In Europe, the churches and shrines sacred to the Black Madonna whose very blackness evokes the mysteries of the great Mother of nature and of soul, still mark these as places of communion between this world and the invisible world. Many healings have been recorded in these places, which continue to this day. One of the places in Europe sacred to the Virgin, and long before her to an older Druidic goddess, is Chartres Cathedral. Chartres is currently being cleaned, so that within and without it is beginning to gleam with the beautiful pale ivory stone used in its original construction. As you enter the cathedral, you may, as I do each time I visit it, find tears welling unbidden into your eyes in response to its extraordinary impact. Soul and body respond to the subtle harmony created by the sacred geometry which surrounds you, incorporated into every stone, arch, and pillar. The very purpose of Chartres is to draw the pilgrim treading its stone-flagged floor from the visible to the invisible world, helping him to see through the veil of matter to the divine ground. The two towers of Chartres represent the sun and the moon, and also, most interestingly, the solar and lunar, male and female principles of both alchemy and Kabbalah. Their union is reflected in the central column of the nave, with the altar at the place of the heart in the human body. The central line of the nave may also be understood to represent eternity, and the two transepts the world of time. The high altar marks the place where they intersect. The labyrinth laid out on the floor of the cathedral symbolizes the pathway through life in this world as a conscious preparation for life in the eternal world, whose presence is indicated by the great rose window on the western facade. When the shape of the rose window is laid over the labyrinth, it matches its dimensions exactly, emphasizing the relationship between them. The labyrinth itself acts like a vortex, drawing the pilgrim into the core of itself, causing him to lose his habitual orientation as he follows the multiple turns and folds of the path to the central six-petaled white rose, whose dimensions exactly match the rosette at the center of the rose window, which holds the figure of Christ. William Anderson, in his wonderful book, The Rise of the Gothic, observes that the sudden appearance in the years 1135 to 1150 of a group of men capable of transforming the artistic landscape of Europe was not fortuitous. It happened because these men had an ideal, a new concept of man to make manifest, a new understanding of their own natures, and a new insight into the springs of art and science. The splendor of Gothic art and architecture derives from the magnanimity of the soul of its makers. That was the source of their imaginative grasp of the possibilities of the new technology and of the quality of life revitalized that shines from their work. The new image of man, which is the work of the Gothic masters, presents man as an individual endowed with free will, who is seen as God and his angels look upon him, and is set within a framework of apparently abstract shapes of portals, arches, niches, and vaults that nevertheless symbolize aspects of the laws and forms of the universe. The Christian concept of the worth of the individual soul, a concept with which the Gospels and Pauline epistles are instinct, only achieved its full expression 1100 years after the death of Christ in the column statues of St. Denis and Chartres. They helped to excise the shame in men's souls at their being men. They spoke without words of peace of mind and rationality, and they gave new intensity to the doctrine of the Incarnation through the radiance of the Spirit proclaimed by the stone from which they were carved. The whole cathedral, with its 9 portals and its original plan of 9 towers, was designed to incorporate the 9 celestial hierarchies defined by Dionysius the Areopagite, a Syrian monk of the 5th century who wrote under the name of a much earlier man, also named Dionysius, who was converted to Christianity by St. Paul when he visited Athens, and is said to have written down the visionary experiences of St. Paul. The works of the 5th century Dionysius, who wrote extensively about the divine darkness of God, were brought from Byzantium to France at the request of the French emperor, a son of Charlemagne. They were translated during the 9th century at the Abbey of St. Denis in Paris by the renowned scholar and Neoplatonist monk John Scotus Erugena, 810 to 877, who wrote an authentic commentary on the writings of Dionysius, and whose other major work will be considered in chapter 17. These writings had an enormous influence on the builders of the Gothic cathedrals. Chartres was built to offer the pilgrim entering its doors the experience of the divine darkness of God, illumined by the light flowing from those 9 celestial hierarchies, and filtered through the exquisite sapphire and ruby radiance of the stained glass windows. As Dionysius himself describes so beautifully in a letter to a woman called Dorothy the Deacon, the divine dark is the inaccessible light in which God is said to dwell. Into this dark, invisible because of its surpassing brightness, and unsearchable because of the abundance of its supernatural torrents of light, all enter who are deemed worthy to know and see God, and by the very fact of not seeing or knowing, are truly in him who is above all sight and knowledge. How, you wonder, was such a marvel as Chartres ever created? How were the enlightened individuals brought together and the skills developed which could design the form, carve, lift, and arrange such enormous amounts of stone in such sublime harmony and proportion? How did they come to incorporate the 3 great innovations which gave to Chartres its revolutionary structure, the pointed arch, the flying buttress, and the ribbed vault? How could flimsy wooden scaffolding hold the tremendous weight of the stones that had to be hauled into place with ropes that could fray and break under the pressure, stones that fitted together with incredible precision and very little mortar? Chartres was built as a temple for the Queen of Heaven. The rose itself was a symbol of divine wisdom, and the whole cathedral with its 3 rose windows was a hymn to Mary as the throne of wisdom and the Queen of Heaven. William Anderson writes, "It was Abbot Suger who helped to develop the iconographical scheme of the Tree of Jesse, culminating in the Virgin and her Son, that was to lead the triumphal portrayal of Mary as the Queen of Heaven in so many cathedrals and churches, through the association with her of so many ancient images of the moon, the stars, the Milky Way. She came to possess a cosmic significance, seen most clearly in the great rose windows of France, as though she were the womb of the universe, containing Christ the Sun-child." The nameless men who designed Chartres, who called themselves masters of the compasses, gave the 12th century culture of France and Europe a new image of man, as radiant with divinity, the more so as he was able to bring such marvels into being. In exalting the image of the Virgin and making her the focus of their creation, they rescued the feminine from the contempt into which it had fallen, and they redeemed nature from its association with sin, releasing it into a glorious affirmation of its beauty in fruit, flower, and foliage, presided over by the green man. Chartres is a phenomenal testament to the creative power of the human imagination when it is directed towards bringing something into being that connects this time-bound world with the eternal one. It is the honoring of this connection that creates civilization. A most interesting book on Chartres by Gordon Strawn describes how there is evidence from the correspondence of notable scholars in the 11th century that they didn't know how to solve very simple geometrical problems. By the 13th century, however, they did. This advance in learning, he concludes, could only have come from Islam during the 12th century, through the cultural contacts with Toledo and Cordova in Spain, and from the Crusades and the conquest of Jerusalem in 1099. The historical evidence, he suggests, shows that it was only through contact with the then highly developed civilization of Islam that the full works of Plato, Aristotle, and Euclid were rediscovered. And it was the translation of these, disseminated mainly through the schools of Paris and Chartres, which initiated a cultural renaissance in northern France. The rise of Gothic architecture was, he concludes, the most spectacular result of this. The master masons of Chartres were inspired and also instructed by the philosophy and sacred geometry taught at the Platonic school at Chartres, that was founded in the 11th century by a remarkable bishop called Fulbert, and renowned all over Europe as a centre of learning. For scholars like Fulbert and Abbot Suger, inspired by the writings of Plato, it was the unseen realm of the metaphysical that was the real world, and the material world, marvellous as it was, the shadow or copy of the Divine One. Strawn believes that there is also evidence of the strong influence of Islam and the skills of Muslim workmen in Chartres, and it is possible that a group of workmen returned from Jerusalem with the Crusaders and spent many years in France. What is evident from the overall plan of Chartres and the sublime elements of its construction is that its builders, architects, sculptors, artists, and designers may have drawn their inspiration from learning how to enter into the world of the soul, seeing in their imagination the prototype of what they wished to bring into being in the town that had been a sacred site for millennia. The rose as a symbol of the soul. The origins of the sacredness of the rose may be traced to the beautiful 8-year orbital pattern made by the planet Venus. It was from ancient times associated with the great goddesses of the ancient world, Isis, Aphrodite, Cybele, Venus, and later the Virgin Mary and the Rosary. In medieval Europe, the rose and the enclosed garden became a symbol of the soul, as well as a place for lovers to meet. But more than that, it was the symbol of the greater soul of the cosmos in which the human soul was contained. The rose is also one of the oldest symbols of the wisdom tradition and of wisdom herself, radiating love to our world from the divine ground. Like the 1,000-petal lotus or the jewel in the heart of the lotus of the Eastern traditions, the rose came to symbolize the awakened soul, united with the divine ground, as in Dante's great vision of the white rose of the Empyrean. The rosary was sometimes called the rose garden, and Mary herself was spoken of as the garden of paradise, and also the rose without a thorn, or the peerless rose. Mary was known in the Middle Ages, the time of the building of Chartres, as the Rosa Mystica. To find the shape of the rose so emphasized in the great 3 rose windows of Chartres and other Gothic cathedrals suggests that the symbolism of the rose held great significance for its builders. I knew none of this when I was haunted long ago by the words of a poem by Walter de la Mare. Oh, no man knows through what wild centuries roves back the rose. The garden as a metaphor of the soul. People often use the word soul when they speak of a piece of music they love, a marvelous building like Chartres, a beautiful garden, or a beloved person. Soul is the specific quality or radiance that people recognized as touching their heart. Anyone who has worked in a garden and seen the response of nature to his efforts, perhaps over many years of labor, will have felt the presence of soul in every leaf and flower. From earliest recorded times, in every great civilization, in Egypt, in Persia and India, in China, in Roman times, and in medieval and Renaissance Europe, people have created gardens as sanctuaries for the purpose of contemplation and communion, and for repose, enjoyment, and delight. The rose garden in 12th century Europe, as well as in Sufi mysticism, became a replica of paradise, and the fountain or well at the center, a symbol of the water of life flowing from the divine world. It is difficult to say when the garden became a metaphor for the soul and a sacred space for connection with the unseen world, but it is certainly found in the mystical streams of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and Taoism. In the tradition of Kabbalah, the Shekinah is often addressed as the garden, and the wedding of the 2 aspects of the Godhead, the Holy One and his beloved, takes place in a garden of pomegranates, symbol of the innermost chamber of the soul. From earliest times we have paintings of gardens, and even, as in Egypt and Persia, of gardeners working in them. The gardens of Moorish Spain in the 9th century, in towns like Cordova, Granada, and Seville, were renowned for their beauty and tranquillity, as were the later gardens of Italy and those of Persia and Mughal India. Further to the east, there were the temple gardens of China and Japan. But the monasteries of Europe, such as that of Monte Cassino in Italy, also fostered the art of creating gardens as sanctuary for prayer and contemplation, as well as cultivating fruit and vegetables to feed the monastic community. And these had a fountain, well, or tree at the centre, perhaps a residual memory from earlier shamanic cultures of the sacred space acting as a portal between the two worlds. Herb gardens were cultivated in these monasteries, and the monks became skilled at using their fragrant essences to heal many illnesses. Gardens were always places which attracted birds as well as the bees, gathering the nectar of flowers and plants to transform into honey. Here, a life of contemplation could flourish like the plants and the birds, protected from the turmoil and violence of the world. We may recall the words of Rumi, "When the rose is gone, and the rose garden fallen to ruin, where will you seek the scent of the rose?" The many dimensions of reality and the great chain of being. The ancient wisdom traditions tell us that we and our world are woven into a cosmic tapestry, whose threads connect us not only with many dimensions of reality, but with multitudes of beings inhabiting those dimensions. Beyond the present confines of our sight, a limitless field of consciousness interacts with our own. They tell us that a great nested chain of beings extends from the ineffable light source of the divine ground to our world, the densest level of physical manifestation. In the New Testament, Jesus may be referring to this multiplicity of dimensions when he says, "In my Father's house there are many mansions." John chapter 14, verse 2. The deepest ground of reality, which contains all other dimensions, was known to the Gnostics in the early years of the Christian era as the pleroma, the root of all, present within all, yet beyond all, a boundless, indefinable, transcendent dimension, which, nevertheless, permeates our world in the way that sunlight permeates air. It may be helpful to imagine the whole universe as an unimaginably fine web of life, holding 3 levels or planes of reality in relationship with each other, 2 of which are invisible to us, and none of which is separate from the others. The plane of eternal spirit, the ground of pure light beyond all form. The intermediate plane of the many subtle realms of soul connecting matter and spirit. The plane of earth and the visible material universe. The first 2 realms of spirit and soul are filled with multiple concentric belts, spheres, or zones of matter, far finer than the composition of our world, and varying in vibratory frequency. These planes are not separate from each other or from the plane of material reality. They interpenetrate each other, but we cannot see the finer levels with our ordinary vision, nor, so far, with our scientific instruments, although, in their encounter with dark matter and the Higgs boson field, they may be touching on them. They could be described as multiple nested fields of different grades of consciousness and different vibrational intensities held within a unifying field, ground, or web of light. These spheres interact with our world and can influence us here in ways of which we are not yet aware. The worlds or spheres which make up this immeasurable realm of soul surround every planet in the solar system and possibly many of the galaxies. They may be part of other universes which interact with ours. As will be explained in chapter 19, countless billions of souls inhabit these invisible spheres or zones of reality. We may wonder why none of this is known to our world. The answer is that it has been known to different metaphysical traditions and is described in the mass of evidence that now exists coming from the other side, but humanity as a whole has remained largely ignorant of it and will remain so until such time as the existence of these unseen dimensions of reality become more widely known, possibly through the discoveries of science, but also through people's own experiences. From the beginning of recorded history, and no doubt long before that, The greatest poets, shamans, and visionaries, as well as artists, musicians, and mystics of all cultures, have connected us to this deep ground of soul. They have connected the seen to the unseen, the time-bound world to the eternal, the waking mind to the dreaming soul. We know from the writings of the Sufi mystics that they have entered this intermediate world of psychic reality and have described it as a plane of reality, similar to our world, down to the finest detail, but of a greater intensity of beauty, colour, and exquisite form. It is composed of matter, but etherealized matter, without the density of the matter of our world. They called it celestial earth, and they recognized our terrestrial world as a manifestation of this unseen world of soul, seeing its beauty and majesty reflected in the deep forests of the earth, the snow-capped mountains, the depth and vast expanse of the sea, the dazzling immensity of the star-strewn night sky. From century to century, as links in a great golden chain, they kept alive the reality of the soul's existence and the true values of the soul, the values that honor and celebrate the wonder, sacredness, and awesome mystery of life. Whether we look at the ancient cosmologies of Egypt, India, Persia, China, or Tibet, or the tradition of Kabbalah, we find a description of subtle worlds or dimensions of reality beyond this material world, and of beings inhabiting those worlds. Angels and archangels abound in the Old and New Testaments and adorn the great cathedrals of Europe. Kabbalists taught that there are 4 separate worlds that interpenetrate and interact with each other, each governed by archangelic and angelic beings, and each a portal to a multitude of other worlds or dimensions. We find the 9 celestial hierarchies known to the mystical Christian tradition through the writings of the monk Dionysius, sculpted on the south porch of Chartres Cathedral above the seated figure of Christ. But unless a guide points them out, we might not register their presence or understand their significance. In the 16th century, the Kabbalist Joseph Cordovero named 13 gates to higher consciousness. In India, for millennia, the practice of Kundalini Yoga offered a method of enabling our limited consciousness to evolve to higher or deeper levels of perception and the experience of invisible worlds. Mahayana Buddhism teaches that there are 3 interpenetrating realities: this material world, a subtle intermediary world, and finally the formless world of pure spirit, named the clear light of the void. All these traditions teach that contemplation and specific exercises prepare us for the encounter with all these transcendent realities. In the intermediate world of soul are held all the memories of human experience, memories which may be said to correspond with the collective unconscious of Jung, and the world of formation, Yetzirah, of Kabbalah. These memories are known to Hindu cosmology as the Akashic records, Akasha being the name of the limitless field in which they are held. The fact that our consciousness can be expanded to awareness of vast planetary and cosmic memory fields has been proven through the methods of holotropic breathing developed and recorded through thousands of sessions by the psychiatrist Stanislav Grof. These transcendent worlds or dimensions of consciousness become accessible through subjective experiences which are not yet accepted by science. Yet this does not mean they do not exist. They are not so much places as we might imagine them. Rather, they are states of being. The metaphysical traditions confirm that we are living within subtle fields of reality, which are imperceptible to our normal level of consciousness, and the instruments so far devised by science. Cosmic Soul and Science. As the last chapter has shown, we are experiencing a profound paradigm shift as we move from seeing the universe as a lifeless machine to seeing it as a unified and living organism in whose life we participate as co-creators with it. Duane Elgin describes the paradigm shift in these words: "Our actual identity or experience of who we are is vastly bigger than we thought. We are moving from a strictly personal consciousness to a conscious appreciation of ourselves as integral to the cosmos. In this new paradigm, our sense of identity takes on a paradoxical and mysterious quality. We are both observer and observed, knower and that which is known. We are each completely unique, yet completely connected with the entire universe. Awakening to the miraculous nature of our identity as simultaneously unique and interconnected with a living universe can help us overcome the species' arrogance and sense of separation that threaten our future. Concepts like David Bohm's implicate order and his understanding of the universe as a sea of being and as an undivided whole reanimate ancient ideas of the cosmos as a great web of life in which no part can be seen as intrinsically separated from any other. With Rupert Sheldrake's hypothesis of morphic fields, we are offered an understanding of how all the forms of our world come into being. There is also the mystery of dark matter and the Higgs-boson field mentioned in the last chapter. Dino Kazanis, author of The Reintegration of Science and Spirituality, believes that scientists may actually be stumbling upon the subtle energy bodies that mystics have spoken of for millennia. Our ability to see, touch, taste, smell, and hear the world is really only due to atoms' electric charge. And because objects on the atomic level interact through electric forces, if there's no such force present, then objects can literally pass right through each other. What intrigues me is that dark matter, being invisible and not able to produce light or any type of electromagnetic waves, means that this is a substance that is not composed of any electric charge. Its presence is determined by its gravity, which is an enormous amount, yet the material itself is totally invisible. So it occurred to me that when the mystics were talking about subtle bodies interpenetrating with our visible body, the only way that could be possible would be if these bodies were made up of something other than charged matter, and dark matter would fit that category quite well. It seems that there have been many names for this unseen ground. Light is the primary image which connects the worlds of science and metaphysics. Science would be enormously assisted in all that it is discovering if it were aware of and could accept the validity of the metaphysical traditions. It could bring things together that have been separated for centuries through a failure to recognize the essential relationship of spirit and matter. The eye of the heart, the soul's organ of perception. As long as science tries to locate the soul in the physical brain and approaches the soul as an object to be observed through the instruments created by the mind, it will not be able to understand the soul either in the personal sense or in the wider cosmic aspect to which Heraclitus was referring. It will not understand the source of revelatory experience, nor will it be able to answer the metaphysical questions which have preoccupied the greatest intellects of previous ages, questions of who we are, why we are here, and what our relationship to the cosmos might be. An understanding of the soul can only be recovered through what has been called the eye of the heart. The heart is the soul's organ of perception. It has its own kind of consciousness, its own deeply instinctive way of knowing, just as the mind has its own way of knowing. It acts as a kind of umbilical cord connecting us to all life on this planet and to the greater life of the cosmos. The heart is the source of our creative imagination, born of our instinct for relationship with that life. The heart generates our quests, our hopes and longings, and will ultimately reunite us with the source from which we have come. Without the heart, without the instinct to imagine, to feel, to hope and to love, life is meaningless, sterile, dead. When we are in touch with our deepest instincts, feelings and intuitions, it comes alive, it vibrates, it sings. Music, poetry, beauty, close, loving relationships, inspiring ideas, magnificent, thrilling achievements like those of the Olympic athletes, all these nourish the heart, and each of them is as essential to the soul in this dimension as food is to the body. What part of the body do you touch when someone asks, "Where is the seat of your feelings?" Most people instinctively touch the area of their heart. What exactly is the eye of the heart? I have found the clearest description of it in 3 books written by an Episcopalian priest called Cynthia Borgia. In them, she explains the essential teaching of the Christian wisdom tradition about the transformation of consciousness. The eye of the heart, as she describes it, is an organ of spiritual perception. Learning how to develop this organ can help us to move into the different understanding of reality, the different worldview that I have attempted to describe in earlier chapters, where I speak of a sacred order. As the eye of the heart develops, so we become aware of the presence of the invisible dimension and discover how to align our consciousness with it, as with an invisible partner, acting in this world from a sense of connection and attunement with the other, without in any way diminishing the importance and validity of experience in this world. The eye of the heart, as Cynthia Borgia describes it, is a vibrant, resonant field that functions like a homing beacon between the realms, and when it is strong and clear, it creates a synchronous resonance between them. The ancient wisdom traditions all saw that the physical world we take for our empirical, time and space-bound reality is encompassed in another, a coherent and powerful world of divine purpose, always surrounding and interpenetrating it. This other, more subtle world is invisible to the senses, and to the mind it appears to be pure speculation. But if the eye of the heart is awake and clear, it can receive, radiate, and reflect that divine reality. We can learn to focus our consciousness on the eye of the heart as the door to the soul, and imagine 2 lines meeting there, the vertical line of eternity and the horizontal line of this world of time. As we learn how to develop the eye of the heart, we begin to live through a different focus, so that we become increasingly in touch with that deeper level of reality. Bringing the dissociated surface mind into harmony and balance with the deeper ground of the soul could change our beliefs, our lives, and our culture. A beautiful quotation from the 12th century reminds us of the importance of focusing on that point, where the worlds of time and eternity meet, the point that is the meeting place of our soul with the eternal ground. All that is moved is subject to time, but it is from eternity that all contained in the vastness of time is born, and into eternity that it is to be resolved. It has long been known that we have undeveloped faculties that are beyond the reach of the rational mind, even that there are large areas of the physical brain that are not used. As Jung discovered, and as many followers of Kabbalah, Vedanta, and Sufism have known for centuries, the power of the imagination and proven methods of connection can be used to create a bridge to the unseen worlds. As Bourgeot describes it, when the vibrational field of a particular human heart comes into spontaneous resonance with the divine heart itself, then finite and infinite become a single, continuous wavelength, and authentic communion becomes possible, bridging the created and uncreated realms within a human being. It is both a realm in itself and the means by which this realm makes itself known. The great Flemish mystic, Jan van Ruysbroek, put it in these words: "Unity is this, that a man feel himself to be gathered together with all his powers in the unity of his heart. Unity brings inward peace and restfulness of heart. Unity of heart is a bond which draws together body and soul, heart and senses, and all the outward and inward powers, and encloses them in the union of love." As the relationship between our individual soul and the eternal ground of life grows stronger, so we become more aware of its voice, its presence, and its subtle guidance. A deepening relationship with this ground can become the inner fabric and focus of our lives. It is an alchemy that we can weave into being with our attention, developing insight through our longing for understanding and relationship with it. If this path into the depth of ourselves is gently followed, we no longer live life unconsciously, responding blindly to events as they happen. We remain in touch with the invisible and receive increasing guidance from it, even as we interact with the visible. Through this transformation, so gradual and subtle that it is almost imperceptible, our perception of the world is transformed. Whoever ventures into the deepest realm of the soul will discover, as T.S. Eliot did, that the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. She will know that each line of poetry that has stirred the reeds of longing, each image of beauty and fragment of what was felt to be truth, has served to reveal, little by little, a presence that has taken humanity countless millennia to discover, yet has always been there, awaiting the moment of recognition. The measure of commitment that is asked of us by the soul in return for her gift of wisdom and guidance may be only gradually revealed, but the inscription on the lead casket chosen by Bassanio in the hope of winning the hand of Portia says it all. Who chooseth me must give and hazard all that he hath. The Greater Self, Presence and Guide.
Every spiritual tradition speaks of the spirit guide, the hidden presence, the daemon, the angelic messenger, the revelatory voice. The tradition of the spirit guide is very ancient and originates with shamanic cultures. As we become more aware of that deeper reality within us and around us, it is more able to make us aware that we are not alone, as the wonderful story of Tobias and the archangel Raphael in the Apocrypha illustrates. In that story, Tobias did not recognize the true nature of his companion until the end of his journey, when Raphael revealed himself to him and to his father, whose sight he had just restored, saying, I am Raphael, one of the 7 holy angels, which present the prayers of the saints, and which go in and out before the glory of the Holy One. Tobit 12:15. There are many synchronicities in our lives, many messages from the realm of spirit that go unnoticed until our focus changes and we begin to attune our consciousness to it.
In Christianity, there has always been a strong tradition of guidance and protection from angels. One has only to look at the great angels portrayed in the medieval sculptures or stained glass of Gothic cathedrals and the paintings of the early Renaissance to see how alive this tradition still was for the people of Europe at that time. It has been lost to our culture because we have banished the radiant emissaries of the divine grant. So we might concur with Rilke in the second of his Duino elegies when he exclaims, Oh, where are the days of Tobias, when one supremely shining stood on the simple threshold, a little disguised for the journey, no longer terrifying? The teaching of the spirit guide is equally strong in Islamic culture, particularly in Sufism, where the world of the soul has a known reality. Henry Corbin, the great scholar of Sufism, writes that some souls have learned everything from invisible guides, known only to themselves. The ancient sages taught that for each individual soul, or perhaps a number of souls with the same nature and affinity, there is a being of the spiritual world who throughout their existence adopts a special solicitude and tenderness towards that soul or group of souls. It is he who initiates them into knowledge, protects, guides, defends, comforts them.
My own life experience has taught me that we can receive help, inspiration, and guidance from the cosmic ground that has brought our consciousness into being over eons of time. and holds all of us in its embrace. Although there are periods of intense darkness and depression that the alchemists called the Nigredo and the Christian mystics the dark night of the soul, with the patient work of establishing a connection and in moments of sudden insight and illumination, we can experience the presence of that ground and develop the ability to listen to its guidance. What is it in us that urges us to grow beyond ourselves? Who is it who knows the end when we can only see the beginning? The form of an oak when we can only see the acorn? What helps us when it seems no help is to be found? Is this all our own doing? Or are we within a consciousness, a presence, greater than our own limited consciousness, which is slowly, laboriously awakening us to awareness of itself?
The poet Yeats speaks of this presence in his autobiography, The Trembling of the Veil. I know that revelation is from the self, but from that age-long memory itself that shapes the elaborate shell of the mollusk and the child in the womb, and that teaches the birds to make their nest. And I know that genius is a crisis that joins that buried self for certain moments to our trivial, daily mind. All spiritual traditions have recorded the words of the great teachers of humanity, whose teaching comes to them from that source ground. In Christianity, the connection with this ground is mediated by the figures of Jesus and the Virgin Mary. In Buddhism, by the great avatars of the Buddha and the goddess Tara. In Hinduism, by Krishna. In Taoism, by Lao Tzu and the enlightened Taoist sages. And in Islam, by Muhammad, its greatest Sufi mystics, and the figure of Al-Qadir, known as the Green One. The divine ground itself has variously been described as the Tao, as Brahman, as God or Allah, as the Void, as the Holy One, and his Shekinah. This divine ground is within us as well as all around us. We need to create a sanctuary within ourselves, where we can listen to its guidance and receive its help. 2,000 years ago, at the beginning of the Piscean Age, Jesus, as a fully awakened man, an emissary from the higher spheres of the cosmos, taught his disciples a path of inner transformation, how to awaken the eye of the heart, and to live through that awakened eye by building a bridge, moment by moment, day by day, between the visible and invisible worlds. But Christianity lost that teaching and became an institution which emphasized belief and belonging to the church as the way to God, rather than the transformation of consciousness and awakening to the presence of a living transcendent reality. As Cynthia Bourgeot says, like a riverbank that is eroded when a river changes its course, so the Christian wisdom tradition about awakening the eye of the heart and the transformation of consciousness was steadily eroded and finally washed away. The distinction Christianity drew between the divine creator and fallen creation deeply injured both God and man. Jesus opened our awareness to our divinity and the change of consciousness that accompanies the creation of a relationship with that hidden ground. Why did he ask us to love one another and to be reconciled with our enemies? Was it because, as an emissary of the divine ground, he understood the sacred nature of the whole manifest order? Why did he say, "Ye are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you"? John chapter 10, verse 34, unless he knew that all of us have the potential of bringing forth a divinity latent within us through a direct and growing relationship with the source ground that he called the Father. Why, in the enigmatic saying in the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, Logion 77, did he say, "Cleave the wood, and I am there. Lift up a stone, and you will find me there"? If not to point to the fact that nature and matter rest on the ground of spirit, that in their essence they are spirit. The revelation that he brought and that his disciples at first found so hard to comprehend was of opening the heart to awareness of the unity and divinity of life, and therefore to love and compassion for all. Jesus himself lived his life from the values and wisdom intrinsic to that perception of reality. This astonishing revelation, this seeing truly into the hidden reality behind the forms of life, living in full awareness of and connection with it, while in this earthly dimension, is the pearl of great price, the treasure in the field, the grain of mustard seed which, tiny at the beginning, when it is first planted in the soil of the soul, can grow into a mighty tree, hung with the fruit of insight, wisdom, and compassion. The beautiful words recorded in the Gnostic Acts of John, spoken by Jesus on the eve of his passion, often come back to me, and I have silently spoken to them myself in moments of doubt or depression. I am a lamp to you who behold me. I am a mirror to you who perceive me. I am a door to you who knock at me. I am a way to you, a wayfarer. You have me for a bed. Rest, then, upon me. There are many passages in the mystic vision which bear witness to the guidance or presence of the divine ground, but I particularly love these words of Bede Griffiths. Each man must discover this centre in himself, this ground of his being, this law of his life. It is hidden in the depths of every soul, waiting to be discovered. It is the treasure hidden in a field, the pearl of great price. It is the one thing which is necessary, which can satisfy all our desires and answer all our needs. But it is hidden now under deep layers of habit and convention. The world builds up a great protective barrier around it. Sri Aurobindo, the great Indian teacher of the last century, speaks of the process of awakening to the presence and guidance of the soul in these words. As the crust of our outer nature cracks, as the walls of inner separation break down, the inner light gets through, the inner fire burns in the heart. The substance of the nature and stuff of consciousness refines to a greater subtlety and purity, and the deeper psychic experiences become possible in this subtler, purer, finer substance. The soul begins to unveil itself. The psychic personality reaches its full stature. The soul then manifests itself as the central being which upholds mind and life and body. It takes up its greater function as the guide and ruler of our nature.
The growing relationship with the eternal ground can change the quality of our lives, giving them a deeper resonance, a different focus. Relationship with the soul brings us into closer relationship with the whole of life. Anxiety and depression, for which we seek treatment through so many drugs and therapies, diminish. Through this transformation, so gradual and subtle that it is almost imperceptible, our perception of the world is transformed. A different and more profound meaning to life comes into being. If we realize we are living within a sacred order, we find a more profound context for relationships and for changing our habits of behavior, both as individuals and as nations and societies, which can help us to resolve many challenging problems in our lives and in the wider world. Ultimately, what in the beginning was perceived as separate, inner and outer, myself and other, human and divine, begins to fuse and become a unity, one life, one consciousness, one unified whole. It used to be thought that we could not become spiritual without sacrificing the life of the body, embracing a celibate life. The idea of celibacy as the way to the spirit was a fundamental error derived from the split between mind and body, which was so deeply imprinted by the polarizing beliefs of the solar age. The body is to be loved and cherished because it is the vehicle of the soul in this dimension of reality. Each person can find his or her path with the help of others who have gone before, or through connecting with people who are teaching methods of awakening. Deep soul friendships can be formed. One of the greatest rewards is finding friends through the mysterious and connecting and attracting power of the soul, now wonderfully facilitated by the internet. Remarkable activist organizations like Avaz, www.avaz.com, are gathering tens of millions of people to speak with one voice, to bring into a being a different world, ruled by different values. They are creating something at a planetary level, similar to the cosmic net of Indra. I found this beautiful passage in the introduction by Christopher Bamford to a book by Alice Howell called The Dove in the Stone.
There is a path of love and knowledge, to which the West is heir. Once on this path, the pilgrim is no longer alone, but in a visionary company of friends of God. This prophetic religion of Sophia, forever moved by love and beauty, is a living transmission and a perpetual renaissance. It has no formal church or earthly institution, but is revealed only in the hearts and minds of human beings. Of the Spirit, it is present whenever 2 or 3 are gathered together in the service of the ensouling of the world, of the return of the soul to God by way of the soul's return to her true self.
We are awakening to awareness that we and the phenomenal world are woven into a cosmic tapestry whose threads connect us not only with each other at the deepest level, but with the divine ground of life beyond our present time-bound sight. A limitless field of consciousness interacts with our own, asking to be recognized by us, embraced by us. The realization that we participate in a multidimensional reality that is the source and ground of our own being may eventually shatter the belief that this material reality is all there is, that we exist on a tiny planet in a lifeless universe, and that there is no life beyond death. It may be that the soul of the cosmos has waited eons for us to reach the point where more than a handful of individuals could awaken to awareness of the ground that animates and supports the whole of our existence. As we begin to relate to the intelligent spirit that informs the whole, we begin to align ourselves with that greater life, like a planet orbiting the sun. In 1841, the American philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote these beautiful words, which are a fitting end to this chapter.
We live in succession, in division, in parts, in particles. Meantime, within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal One. And this deep power in which we exist and whose beatitude is all accessible to us is not only self-sufficing and perfect in every hour, but the act of seeing and the thing seen, the seer and the spectacle, the subject and the object are one. We see the world piece by piece, as the sun, the moon, the animal, the tree, but the whole of which these are shining parts is the soul. Chapter 16. Instinct and the Body, as a manifestation of the soul. Man has no body distinct from his soul, for that called body is a portion of the soul discerned by the 5 senses, the chief inlets of soul in this age. William Blake, from The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. People say that what we are seeking is a meaning for life. I think that what we're seeking is an experience of being alive, so that our life experiences on the purely physical plane will have resonances within our innermost being and reality, so that we actually feel the rapture of being alive. Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth. The soul is not in the body is in the soul. Meister Eckhart. I have always liked the story of Androcles and the lion, because it illustrates so clearly how healing the wounds the instinct carries brings rich rewards in the arena of life. Androcles was a Roman slave who had been taken to North Africa. He tried to escape to the coast and return to Rome. He knew that if he were caught, he would be killed, so he waited until the nights were dark and moonless before creeping out of his master's house and stealing through the town into open country. He hurried as fast as he could, but when day broke, he found that instead of reaching the seacoast as he had hoped, he was in a desert. Seeing a cave in the side of some cliffs, he crept into it, lay down, and very soon fell asleep. He was awakened by a terrible roaring, and to his horror saw a huge lion standing at the entrance to the cave. Androcles had been sleeping in the lion's den. There was no escape. The great lion barred the way. Androcles waited for the lion to spring on him and kill him, but it did not move. Instead, it moaned and licked one of its paws that seemed to be bleeding. Seeing the animal was in great pain, Androcles forgot his terror and came forward. The lion held up its paw as if asking for help. Androcles then saw that a great thorn had become embedded in the paw, which had cut it and made it swell. He drew the thorn out with a quick movement. Relieved of the pain, the grateful lion licked its paw, then limped out of the cave, and in a few minutes returned with a dead rabbit, which it laid at Androcles' feet. When Androcles had managed to light a fire and cooked and eaten the rabbit, the lion led him to a spring of fresh water gushing out of the earth. For 3 years, man and lion lived in the cave, but at last Androcles began to crave the society of his fellow men. He left the cave, but was soon caught by some soldiers and sent as a fugitive slave to Rome. There he was condemned to be killed by wild beasts in the Colosseum on the first public holiday. A vast multitude of spectators came to see the sight, including the emperor. Androcles was pushed into the great open space, and a lance was thrust into his hand. With this, he was told, he was to defend himself against the powerful lion, which had been kept for days without food, to make it savage and fierce. Androcles trembled when the ravenous lion sprang out of its cage with a terrible roar, and the lance shook in his grasp as the great beast came bounding up to him. But, instead of knocking him to the ground with a blow of its paw, it began to lick his hands. Androcles saw to his amazement that it was the same lion with which he had lived in the wilderness. He patted it, and leaning on its head, he cried. All the spectators marveled at the strange scene, and the emperor sent for Androcles, asking him for an explanation. He was so delighted with the story that he made Androcles a free man. Androcles had 2 encounters with the lion. The first was in the wilderness, the lion's domain. The second in the Roman arena, symbolically the arena of life. There are, even in this children's tale, undertones of heroic myth telling the story of the man who makes the journey into the wilderness of his soul, there to be reconciled with the instinctual powers symbolized by the lion, whose wound he heals. He makes the return journey into the world where, in the challenging arena of life, instead of having his life destroyed by the wounded and enraged animal, he has its support and friendship. To make friends with the lion and take the thorn out of its paw is to receive the protection and guidance of the instinctual powers of the soul. Many people pass their lives in a state of slavery to misery, illness, and oppression, or to circumstances they loathe and feel imprisoned by, or in a state of hatred and resentment against something or someone they feel has injured them. These powerful emotions are symbolized by the wounded lion with the great thorn in its paw. If the thorn is not removed, it is likely that the lion will become dangerous. The lives of countless people are affected, even destroyed, by the enraged and wounded lion that is condemned to roam the wilderness beyond our conscious awareness. People can pose a threat to others, particularly children, because of their power to hurt and destroy them. Countless atrocities are committed by the enraged lion within us. We have, so to speak, been sleeping in the lion's den like Androcles. The different forms of addiction prevalent in our culture are symptoms of an inability to relate to the instinct, a lack of understanding as to what its needs are, and why, when these are not attended to, it can drive us into negative life patterns. If there is nothing to help us develop insight into this foundation of our lives, there is no way in which its voice can reach us, nor can we be enriched and developed by a relationship with something that is infinitely more powerful than our conscious mind. Cut off from our instincts, we become impoverished and diminished. A vital part of us has no means of gaining our attention, except through breakdown, addiction, and disruptive or violent patterns of behavior. An extraordinary photograph published in the newspapers on January the 13th, 2007, showed a lion reaching through the bars of its cage to embrace a woman, giving her what looked like a passionate kiss on the lips. Its two paws were tenderly wrapped around her neck, its eyes were shut, and it looked, for all the world, as if it were in a state of bliss. The woman, Ana Julia Torres, is a teacher who lives in Colombia. She had rescued this African lion called Jupiter from a circus where it had been mistreated and nursed him back to health. 10 years ago, she began to rehabilitate abused animals, and now has a center housing 800 lions, as well as a variety of other animals. There was something intensely moving about the warmth and tenderness of the lion's spontaneous embrace, and the trust in this woman who dared to invite and welcome it, stroking the lion's thick, rough mane, as if it were an enormous dog. It was so perfect an image of the relationship we might have with our instinct, if only we knew how to embrace it, and allow it to embrace us, to love it, as in the story of Beauty and the Beast, where the fearsome beast is transformed through Beauty's love into a prince. The split between mind and body. In our fascination with our mind, we have not paid nearly enough attention to the importance of instinct in our lives. As the conscious mind has gained more and more autonomy and independence from the deeper matrix of instinct, out of which it has evolved, the whole superstructure of consciousness has become detached from the age-old base or ground, out of which it developed, rather like an iceberg breaking away from the landmass to which it belonged. This unconscious split creates great tension between the two separated aspects of the soul, which finds its way into many conflicts that are acted out in our personal lives, as well as in the wider arena of the world. During the 4,000 years of the solar era, as explained in Chapter 6, everything became fragmented as we lost the sense of living within a sacred order. As this process developed, so spirit and nature, soul and body, came to be separated. Our conscious mind became separated from its instinctive foundation, becoming not only fearful but also repressive of it. In splitting nature from spirit, separating body from soul, and contaminating the instincts with guilt and fear, a vital part of our nature was injured. A great wrong was done to the body and the instincts associated with it. In nearly all religious and philosophical teaching of the solar age, the body was presented as the main impediment to spirituality, something to be treated with revulsion and contempt. A deep suspicion of feeling and emotion was built into the education of the ruling class from Greek times onwards. In Christianity, the mortification of the flesh was a habit dear to saints and ascetics.
Unconsciously influenced by this way of thinking, I used to think of the soul as the spiritual aspect of myself, and tended to look down on the body as something inferior to spirit and to mind. It did not occur to me that the body could be the vehicle of the soul in this material dimension of reality, that it could actually be contained within the field of the soul. It may be that, because death and the decomposition of the body seem so final, it is difficult to conceive of the physical body, subject to decay, as an intrinsic aspect of the soul. Yet, as Meister Eckhart observed, the soul is not in the body is in the soul.
With the waning of the influence of religion, the focus of modern culture has now swung from spirit to body, and we have become obsessed with sexuality and the body, particularly the body of woman, that in our consumer society is subjected to every kind of modification to make it more sexually attractive in order to accord with the image of woman propagated by the media. But this brings no real relationship with the body, no love of it, no real care and respect for it, or awareness of its signals of distress. It suggests an alienation from instinct and an unconscious state of possession by it. The distinction that conditions our thinking between what is spirit or spiritual and what is matter or material has influenced not only the attitudes which still govern religion and science, but the way we treat our own body and the bodies of other people. Many people treat the body as a much abused servant, doing the will of its master, the mind. Changing this habit and beginning to see the body and matter in general as part of the sacred order of life invites a fundamental rethink of current attitudes to the body, a more inclusive understanding of the soul which incorporates the body as the vehicle of living or incarnating on this planet may seem strange. Yet, in its widest definition, I think it is essential to understand that the soul includes, at one end of the spectrum, the body we all inhabit, and at the other, the life of the universe, including the body, the matter that science is exploring. Ultimately, I hope that science will discover how these are related to each other through one unifying, underlying ground. Instinct as a cosmic power.
The dream that I described in Chapter 2, where I stood at the edge of a deep gorge and saw, rising out of it, an enormous cobra-like serpent with its 7 hoods spread out in a great semicircular fan, shocked me into awareness of the importance of instinct. It was a truly electrifying apparition that aroused awe, dread, and wonder in me in equal measure. In Jungian terms, its message to me was that it personified something unknown that I needed to be aware of, that I was forcefully made aware of in a manner I would never forget. In mythological terms, it was a manifestation of a fearsome serpent or dragon that guards the treasure. Without actually seeing this archetypal serpent rising out of the gorge, I don't think I would ever have come to understand instinct as something so powerfully and overwhelmingly numinous, something that is at the very root of life and the medium through which we are all connected to each other and to the life of the planet, and beyond that, to the life of the cosmos. Even more than this, I gradually became aware that this gigantic serpent personified the instinctive intelligence active within every aspect of life, active within all species and the whole evolutionary process on this planet, leading ultimately to the development of consciousness in our species. I now believe it represents the profound instinctive intelligence of the heart that has been overlooked in the fascination with the mind and the brain.
The myth of the fall in the book of Genesis describes our separation from nature and the divine world. As this myth tells us, the serpent, as an image of instinct, was deeply implicated in the role it played in the drama of the Garden of Eden, tempting Eve to take the apple from the tree of knowledge. Long before this, however, it was the primary symbol associated with the Great Mother and her power to regenerate life. In this influential myth it was vilified, punished by God and condemned to bite man's heel and to be bruised and crushed by him. Unsurprisingly, in the Christian tradition, the serpent came to be viewed as a symbol of evil, even of the devil. The instincts in general, but particularly the sexual instinct associated with the deceptive role of the serpent, came to be regarded with the deepest suspicion, fear, and revulsion. Western myths of the solar era, where the hero battles with the serpent or dragon, portray man in a new dominant role towards nature. Following the theme of this mythology, it was believed that the body and its animal instincts had to be controlled and subjugated by the mind, a concept which derives from the Genesis myth, as well as from the chain of ideas descending from Plato and later philosophers, who regarded the body and its passions as inferior to the mind, needing to be mastered and controlled by it. What was physical or instinctive became identified with what was feminine. Darkness and chaos were associated with the feminine, seen as antithetical and threatening to the light and order of the masculine. Matter, darkness, chaos, evil, and female were equated with each other, and the body and its instincts were identified with these. The rationality of the mind was contrasted with the irrationality of the body and its passions. It is extremely difficult to change the imprinting of these beliefs on the collective soul of a civilization, particularly when the mythology that is at the root of them is deeply embedded in religious teaching. But it is essential to do so because the wholeness of our nature and the wholeness of spirit and soul have been injured by them. An altogether different attitude to the instinct is found in the East, where the serpent and the dragon, in China, are ubiquitous as a symbol of life's eternal power to create, destroy, and regenerate itself. In my journeys through the Far East, I found the serpent most strongly represented in the magnificent temples of Angkor in Cambodia, and in countless temple sculptures throughout India and Southeast Asia. The Buddha is often shown seated on the coils of a gigantic serpent, whose 7 cobra heads fan out behind him to form a protective canopy. To have the serpent as guardian and guide, rather than adversary, means that the immensely powerful energy of the instinct, unconscious in us in its primordial state, has been raised to a fully enlightened state of consciousness, the state that has been realized by the greatest spiritual teachers of humanity. This potential awakening of human consciousness was, in ancient Indian spiritual teaching, named the Path of the Serpent, or, in Sanskrit, Nagayuna. This path, which is known to be at least 4,000 years old, describes the journey of the serpent goddess Kundalini, the divine creative power of the universe, also known as the serpent fire, from the lowest chakra at the base of the spine to the highest chakra at the top of the head. Here, the twin serpents, representing the lunar and solar aspects of the life energy, the Ida and Pingala, unite in blissful union in the central channel, the Shushumna, and flower in the crown of the 1,000-petaled lotus. This is truly the inner expression of the sacred marriage. Its effects are manifest in a transformation of the personality. The dormant power of consciousness to know itself in its innate divinity awakens and manifests as the fullest expression of what, in essence, it is and we are. The Sanskrit term for Kundalini is Shaktipat, which means descent of grace. Whatever name we give it, Kundalini is the instinctive power of our own innate and unrecognized divinity, guiding us home to the source from which we have come. It is an act of love on the part of the divine that releases the dormant potential of the instinct residing in an unconscious state within our innermost nature. The long and arduous journey of consciousness from root to crown signifies its transformation from an unconscious state to the highest expression of wisdom, insight, and compassion. The body in the Eastern traditions is the container, the vessel, the locus of this process of transformation, and the repository of hidden wisdom. The fact that our consciousness is capable of awakening to cosmic consciousness has been known and attested to for millennia in the East. In the West, we can find it most clearly described in the alchemical tradition, see chapter 18, and in the esoteric teaching of Kabbalah. It is also described in the experience of mystics, and in Dante's masterpiece, The Divine Comedy, which reveals Dante's own transformation and awakening as he is guided by Beatrice, image of his soul, into the higher realms of consciousness, and his ultimate vision of the celestial rose and the love that moves the sun and the other stars. Our consciousness, as Jung described it, is like a plant that lives on its rhizome. Its true life is invisible, hidden in the rhizome, and that rhizome is the vast realm of instinct which, as I now understand it, is the ultimate source of the wisdom we need to guide us in our journey of awakening on this planet. The largely unconscious drives and habits of behavior that we call instinct are a fundamental aspect of the soul's life. Instinct is not lower than or inferior to consciousness, it is consciousness, ultimately an expression of cosmic consciousness. It is a mighty cosmic power which organizes the holographic patterning of life forms, the infinite fractal proliferation of itself through countless fields or levels. It cannot be separated from cosmic soul as I have described this in the last chapter, nor can it be separated from the deep ground of spirit. In its different varieties of expression, it is the creative fire which gives form and meaning to our life. We slowly climb the ladder of insight and understanding of this power that lives in us and through us in every cell of our being. The whole structure of our conscious mind rests on the foundation of instinct, has developed over countless millennia out of instinct. Instinct is the original root of our feelings, our imagination, our intuition, our rational mind. It is instinct which connects us to the great web of life of this planet, and beyond that of the universe. If we reject this vital dimension of our being, we cut ourselves off from the web of life to which we belong. The greater the dissociation within our nature, the greater is the distress and disharmony in ourselves, and the greater the risk that we will destroy ourselves by attacking and killing each other. Instinct is the origin of our emotions and of our deepest feelings and longings, of our joy and delight in life, as well as our grief and loneliness, our hope and fear. It gives rise to the feeling that something is right or wrong, helpful or harmful, which can grow into what we call conscience, and the ability to make conscious choices and exercise some measure of free will. As we become more conscious, it can become our guide. It is the origin of our desire to create, explore, and discover, and to protect, preserve, and prolong life both in ourselves and others. It is the power which, like the force of gravity, draws us into empathic relationships and connection with others, with nature, with the cosmos. It is the source of our attraction to beauty, harmony, order. It is the origin of our desire to improve the conditions of our lives, to heal the wounds that we and our species carry, to understand who we are and where we are going. Above all, it is the source of our creative imagination and our creative power. It seems that a multi-layered cosmic field organizes every life system, from the great galaxies of space to all species of life, including our own. The functioning of the instinctive life of nature with all its miraculous interacting and coordinating systems is ordered on this plane of reality by invisible fields, which give every species their specific form and the patterns or habits of behavior that we name instincts. As described in Chapter 14, the work of Rupert Sheldrake, particularly the latest version of A New Science of Life, 2009, and The Science Delusion, 2012, offers the clearest explanation of these multi-leveled morphic fields. He sees the universe as an evolving system of habits that can, on this planet, mutate into new habits as we learn new skills and develop new understanding. He writes, "Through morphic resonance, animals and plants are connected with their predecessors. Each individual both draws upon and contributes to the collective memory of the species. Animals and plants inherit the habits of their species and of their breed. The same applies to humans. An extended understanding of heredity changes the way we think of ourselves, the influence of our predecessors, and our effects on generations yet unborn." It may seem strange to think of instinct as the primary source of our imagination, but reordering the different categories of our experience, reconnecting the imagination with instinct as the dynamic creativity of cosmic life, draws things together that have long been separated. Imagination is that aspect or expression of instinct that communicates most readily through images. in the way Einstein saw himself riding a sunbeam to the edge of the universe and returning towards the sun, an image that led him to his theory of relativity. Yeats described the imagination as a sympathy with all living beings, recalling the lost sense of participation mystique of shamanic cultures. Coleridge understood it as the very ground of our consciousness, of our capacity to feel, to think, and create. The primary imagination I hold to be the living power and prime agent of all human perception, a repetition in the finite mind of the eternal act of creation in the infinite I am. Imagination is a vitally important faculty of our being because it acts as a bridge relating us to all that currently lies beyond our limited consciousness, and that bridge is itself an expression of instinct. Instinct can sometimes drive us along a life path which it has chosen for us, not necessarily one we would have chosen for ourselves. The Greeks recognized its irresistible power and called it the daemon. They gave the different aspects of it the names of gods and goddesses, recognizing that they would be taken over by one or another of them when they fell in love or were driven to embark on war. Because instinct is the power of life itself, it can both create and destroy. It is the source of the greatest danger to us, as described in chapters 12 and 13, and also, paradoxically, the greatest wisdom, as the image of the dragon guarding the treasure suggests. It can possess and elude, as well as heal, guide, and enlighten. Above all, perhaps, it is the power that impels us to seek the meaning of our lives, a meaning that is specific and unique to each one of us. Viktor Frankl observed in his profoundly moving book, Man's Search for Meaning, that man's search for meaning is the primary motivation in his life. As I write this, I think of the remarkable life of Mary Colvin, war correspondent for the Sunday Times, who was killed by a Syrian shell fire in February 2012 in the city of Homs. She discovered the meaning of her life in her passionate desire to bring to the awareness of the public the suffering inflicted on civilians by oppression and war. Her immense courage in pursuit of what she saw as her life's purpose led to her tragic death, but not before she had informed the world of the horrors inflicted on the people of Syria by its government. She was someone who was truly alive. The heart.
To respond to the quest for meaning in our individual lives, to find the pathway of connection to our deepest instincts, we need to listen to our heart, to feel its presence within us, to recognize its voice. The lion in the story of Androcles is an ancient symbol of the heart and the instinctual ground of our soul. It stands for the heart's strength and courage, its intelligence, resilience, and boldness, its fierce passion and compassion. As described in the last chapter, the heart is the soul's organ of perception and plays a far greater role in our lives than we realize. The heart is the key to understanding how the instinct works, how powerful and all-pervasive and amazing it is. It is through the electromagnetic energy field of the heart that we have access to a wider energy field that connects us to each other and the greater field of the planetary organism. So, as you read this, take a moment to connect with your heart as if you were encountering it for the first time, with full awareness of its importance.
There have been discoveries in the field of neurocardiology that do not reach the general public and are, in the words of Joseph Chilton Pearce, far more awesome than the discovery of non-locality in quantum physics. He noted that Rudolf Steiner observed over a century ago that the greatest discovery of 20th century science would be that the heart is not a pump, but vastly more, and that we need to allow the heart to teach us to think in a new way. The heart is not only a pump circulating blood around the body. Speaking in purely physiological terms, the heart is now known to be another brain, an organ that is a center of intelligence and consciousness, as important, if not more important, than the brain that we associate with our mind. It is now thought that the heart is the main organ in the body that coordinates the functioning of the autonomic nervous system, the immune system, and the endocrine system, and that the heart communicates continuously with the brain, as summarized by the Institute of Heart Math in Boulder Creek, California. The heart communicates with the brain in 4 ways: neurologically, through the transmission of nerve impulses; biochemically, via hormones and neurotransmitters; biophysically, through pulse waves; and energetically, through the interactions of their electromagnetic fields. Cardiologists call this whole system the heart-brain. These 4 different transmitters of information function below the awareness of the conscious mind, yet continually interact with the brain, exchanging information with it and profoundly affecting the way we think, feel, and behave from moment to moment. It is now known that there is a continuous highway of neural communication between the older limbic emotional brain, the heart, and the 2 hemispheres of the neocortical brain, but that the neural connections from the emotional to the cognitive centers is greater than the number going the other way. The heart responds instantaneously to the signals coming from the older emotional brain and passes them via its own intrinsic nervous system to the neocortical brain. It apparently plays a role in the control of cardiac function, independently of the autonomic nervous system. Without this personal nervous system, which is vital for its stability and efficiency, the heart cannot operate properly. It has also been discovered to be a hormonal gland, releasing a hormone which has an effect on the kidneys, the adrenal glands, and certain regions of the brain. Exploring the connection between the heart, the older, instinctive, emotional, limbic brain, and the newer neocortical one that we usually refer to as our mind, can help us to understand, in terms of brain chemistry and neuronal connections, why the heart is so important, why the instincts and emotions are so powerful, why they can have both a positive or negative effect on us, and why it takes a great deal of insight and attention to become aware of how and where they are influencing our lives, sometimes in creative ways that bring us great happiness, and sometimes in ways that drive us to inflict harm on others as well as on ourselves. If the heart, conduit of our deepest instincts, emotions, and feelings, carries wounds, these, like blocked arteries, can restrict the flow of energy through the soul's circulatory system, leading to the impairment of mental and physical health. The body remembers everything that has happened to it, and many therapies are focused on helping to recover these buried memories, so that the nervous system can be released from the memory of the traumas it has experienced. The Institute of Heart Math has discovered that making a conscious connection with the heart can initiate changes in deeply imprinted patterns in the nervous system and improve mental coherence. It has developed methods of improving the coherence, ordered, harmonious function of the heart rhythm, which in turn affects both the older emotional brain and the neocortical one. These can improve sight, hearing, mental clarity, and the ability to relate to others. According to Heart Math, the heart produces by far the body's most powerful rhythmic electromagnetic field, which can be detected several feet away by sensitive instruments. Research shows our heart's field changes distinctly as we experience different emotions. It is registered in people's brains around us and apparently is capable of affecting cells, water, and DNA studied in vitro. Growing evidence also suggests energetic interactions involving the heart may underlie intuition and important aspects of human consciousness. The psychiatrist Dr. David Servan Schreiber, who is familiar with the discoveries made by the Institute of Heart Math, comments in his book, Healing Without Freud or Prozac, that heart and brain can either cooperate or compete for the control of our thoughts and our way of behaving. When they work together, we feel a sense of harmony, calm, and well-being. When they are in conflict, we can feel agitated, anxious, depressed, and unhappy. With practice, we can learn to become aware of these fluctuations in mood and take steps to help ourselves regain a state of harmony and balance. Here are some of the known facts about the heart, drawn from the website of the Institute of Heart Math, www.heartmath.org, and from an interview with Joseph Chilton Pearce. The heart is the most powerful generator of electromagnetic energy in the body, with the largest rhythmic electromagnetic field of any of the body's organs. The electromagnetic field of the heart envelops every cell of the body. The electrical field of the heart is about 60 times greater in amplitude than the electrical activity generated by the brain, and the magnetic field produced by the heart is more than 100 times greater in strength than the field generated by the brain, and can be detected a number of feet away from the body, 12 to 25 feet in all directions. The heart is connected to all the vital organs of the body and maintains the balance of these for the optimal functioning of the entire body-heart-mind organism. 60 to 65% of all the cells in the heart are neural cells, which function in the same way as brain cells, but monitor and maintain control of the entire mind, brain, body organism, and the direct, unmediated connections between the heart and the older emotional brain as well as the neocortical one. The heart is the coordinating center of the major endocrine glandular structure of the body, which produces the hormones that profoundly affect the operations of body, brain, and mind, and coordinate the functioning of the other systems in the body, including the immune system. What is fascinating, Joseph Chilton Pearce says, is that it has been found that the heart produces 2.5 watts of electrical energy at each pulsation, creating an electromagnetic field that is like a holograph of the electromagnetic field around the Earth. According to the Heart Math Institute, the electromagnetic field of the heart produces holographically the same field as the one produced by the Earth and solar system. Now, physicists are beginning to look at the electromagnetic auras as simply the organization of energy in the universe. All these are operating holographically, that is, at the smallest, unbelievably tiny level, between the dendrites at the synapse, the body, the earth, and on outward. All are operating holographically and selectively. Just placing our hand over the area of our heart changes the brain waves. The heart, as well as the brain, produces a balancing hormone, oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which can and should be activated at the beginning of our lives by a loving and nurturing relationship with our mothers. We seek it and rediscover it in a close relationship with our partner. Frustration, anxiety, and fear make the heart rate jagged and rapid, and this has an effect on the whole nervous system. Loving, stroking, caressing the body can make it calm and rhythmic. The Institute of Heart Math has found that as individuals learn how to sustain heart-focused states of appreciation or love, the brain's electrical activity comes into coordination or coherence with the heart rhythms. Changing the emotions can alter brain activity. The brain's alpha wave activity is synchronized to the cardiac cycle. During states of high heart rhythm coherence, alpha wave synchronization to the heart's activity significantly increases. All of this is of interest to anyone working in the field of healing and psychotherapy. It may be that when therapists become aware of the presence of a field between themselves and their client, it is the electromagnetic field of the heart. Their attitude to their client, whether caring and heart-centered or perfunctory and distant, may affect the heart of the client and the electromagnetic field between and around them, enhancing or negating their power to heal. Chilton continues, "Our data indicate that one person's heart signal can affect another's brainwaves, and that heart-brain synchronization can occur between two people when they interact. Finally, it appears that as individuals increase psychophysiological coherence, they become more sensitive to the subtle electromagnetic signals communicated by those around them. Taken together, these results suggest that cardio-electromagnetic communication may be a little-known source of information exchange between people, and that this exchange is influenced by our emotions. There is a method called quick coherence, which is explained on the HeartMath website, www.heartmath.org, whereby one can intentionally alter one's emotional state through focusing on the heart and doing specific exercises which can change a negative into a positive feeling state, rendering the heart's rhythm more coherent and influencing the clarity of one's thoughts and intuitions and cognitive performance in general. I have found it extremely helpful in my own life, and with the permission of the Institute of Heart Math, offer a practice for connecting with and altering the rhythm of the heart in 3 stages, and a further one for consolidating this practice. These are an excellent alternative to meditation, a form of meditation in itself. Quick coherence technique. 1. Heart focus. Focus your attention on the area of your heart, placing your left hand on the center of your chest. 2. Heart-focused breathing. Imagine your breath is flowing in and out of that area, breathing slowly and gently in through your heart to a count of 5 or 6, and slowly and easily out through your heart to the same count. Continue to breathe in and out in this way, until your breathing feels smooth and balanced, and has a natural inner rhythm that feels good to you. 3. Heart feeling. Continue to breathe through the area of your heart. As you do so, recall a positive image or feeling, a time or place where you felt happy and at peace with yourself, when you were doing something you enjoyed or felt love or compassion for a special person or animal or aspect of nature, something that can bring a smile to your face as you recall it. Once you have connected with this feeling, sustain it while you continue to practice your heart focus breathing, and heart feeling. Heart lock-in technique. Hold the feeling of genuine love or care for someone or something in your life. Send this feeling of love and care towards yourself, extending it to the boundaries of the electromagnetic field that surrounds your body. Then expand it to flow outwards towards others and to the wider world in the form of waves of energy. If you experience uncomfortable, anxious feelings, send love and compassion to those feelings. Befriending a negative feeling and sending compassion to it can release or dissolve the blockage. These exercises will gradually strengthen your conscious connection to your heart, build up resilience and the ability to be aware of subtle changes in its rhythm. The body-mind organism. There is another aspect to understanding your body and the importance of the emotions, which can be related to everything that the Heart Math Institute has discovered about the importance of the heart. Some decades ago, the biologist Candice Peart wanted to answer the question, how can emotions transform the body, either creating disease or healing it, maintaining health or undermining it? She discovered that our emotions are the crucial link between mind and body, and that specific chemicals called neuropeptides are related to specific emotional states, and further that these neuropeptides are found to be active all over the body, including the older limbic brain, the neocortex, the stomach, and the intestines. Realizing that peptides are the universal biochemical language of the emotions, she called them Molecules of Emotion, the title of her extraordinary book, one of the most interesting I have ever read. This was a groundbreaking discovery because she realized that neuropeptides are the connecting factor between the emotions and physiological processes. Each specific peptide, chemical, mediates a specific emotional state. We can no longer speak of such a thing as objective, rational thought, because thought is inextricably involved with emotion. She found that neuropeptides connect the brain, the hormonal system, and the immune system, acting as messengers between them, and able to alter or modify both mood and behavior. She realized that every change in the physiological state is accompanied by an instantaneous change in the emotional state, and every change in the emotional state is accompanied by an instantaneous change in the physiological one. This led her to understand that it is a mistake to think in terms of 2 separate categories of mind and body, because these form a single organism that she called body-mind, and saw as an amazing field of interacting information which travels everywhere instantaneously. She realized that we can no longer view the body as a machine, but as an incredibly efficient information network with inbuilt intelligence, and that this intelligence is not only to be found in the brain, but in cells in every part of the body. The implications of her discoveries are huge, and are a key to understanding the origins of disease and how to heal it. She writes, "Wherever there are receptors, there is memory. So some of our old patterns and our old subconscious ways of doing things are really located within the body. Trauma can be stored not just in little parts of our brain, but deeply within our body, which may explain some of the very powerful aspects of various kinds of bodywork. Psychological intervention in cancer, visualization for other diseases can change the immune system, can truly change physical measurements. It's very profound. I believe that there needs to be more research and that people need to pay very close attention to it. It does seem foreign. However, it must have seemed very foreign and shocking when we heard that the Earth revolved around the Sun. It's really of that magnitude." Birth and the importance of the mother-child bond. The importance of the heart and the way specific neuropeptides mediate specific emotional states goes far to explain why the heart bond between mother and child is so significant. It may be that the electromagnetic field of the mother's heart affects the minute field of the baby's heart. The life of the body begins with our conception and birth into the world. Our understanding of the formation and development of the embryo and fetus in the womb, and the birth of a child has been enormously expanded by seeing this process described in books and on television. Medicine and science between them have revealed to us more and more of the miraculous growth of the fetus in the womb. In addition, the pioneering work of two remarkable men, Michel Odent and Frederick Leboyer, has emphasized the importance of the heart and the positive or negative impact on children's instincts and emotions of the way they are brought into the world. In their approach to birth, water takes on the utmost importance, both for the mother prior and during birth, and for the baby after birth. Odent, in his book Water and Sexuality, shows how important the connection with water is for humans generally, and how even a woman's seeing a water bath in the delivery room can hasten and facilitate the delivery of her child. Water births, as initiated by Michel Odent in his hospital at Pithiviers in France, and introduced in hospitals the world over, offer mothers an unusual and calming experience, allowing them to enter into what he calls the primal adaptive process, where instincts and emotions are, as it were, fused with each other, and where the momentous change taking place in both mother and baby can be allowed to unfold as the instinctive responses of the older primordial brain direct it. We need, Odent says, a new word added to our vocabulary, which embraces both emotion and instinct, and which does not set up an artificial barrier between them. Leboyer's graphic description of the acute pain, terror, and distress that the newly born baby can experience if insensitively handled, held upside down by the feet, slapped on the buttocks, its eyes blinded by bright lights, its ears assaulted by loud voices, is deeply disturbing, the more so when this unconscious brutality is contrasted with the sensitive and gentle way a baby can be welcomed into a darkened, hushed atmosphere, where there are no loud voices, bright lights, or cold surfaces to terrify it. In his book, Birth Without Violence, he writes, "We should be crying tears of shame, crying for our own blindness, the same blindness that made us think women had to suffer simply because we didn't know any better. Happily, we no longer believe in the old saying, 'In pain shall ye give birth.' Isn't it time to do for the child what we've been trying to do for the mother?" He demonstrated that babies are incredibly sensitive and vulnerable. They can feel far more intensely than adults. They are conscious, sentient beings in the womb and at birth. Incredibly, not so long ago, babies and animals were thought to be incapable of feeling because they had not developed a conscious sense of self. Fortunately, these old attitudes are changing. Leboyer advocated that the umbilical cord should not be cut immediately after birth, allowing the baby to adjust to the new experience of breathing through the cord as well as through the lungs, until the cord stops beating, indicating that the lungs were ready to take over, and that the cord could be cut. Immersing a baby in water, after having placed him for a while on his mother's warm body, gives him again the feeling of being weightless as in the womb, and this can soothe and calm him. Leboyer takes his insight into the effects of a traumatic birth further, connecting it with the aggressive patterns of behavior in later life that reenact it. The pain and terror we experienced at birth is inflicted on others, decades later, in the acts of violence and terrorism that ravage the world. The memory of birth, and the terror that accompanies it, remains in each one of us. But since it is so loaded with fear and pain, it lies dormant and totally repressed, like a dreadful secret at the bottom of our unconscious. How few of us are aware of how much unconscious fear there is in our lives. All this fear linked with the horror which is birth. It is as if the fear of death, the dark shadow that casts its gloom over our whole lives, is nothing but the unconscious memory of the fear we felt when we were born. In this he is supported by the research of Stanislav Grof, as explained in his book, Beyond the Brain, Birth, Death, and Transcendence in Psychotherapy, which brilliantly details the 3 stages of the perinatal experience and how they affect our lives. Although the sensitive approach of these men to the birth of the child may not be fully realized in every hospital, where currently there are not nearly enough midwives to care for mothers through the different stages of labor, nevertheless, their ideas have had a profound influence on the way infants are handled when they emerge from the womb, making that emergence less of a traumatizing ordeal. There is a new emphasis on gentleness and on the primary need of the infant to bond with the mother's body immediately after birth. If their suggestions are followed, the infant's feeling of intense bliss after the trauma of expulsion from the womb is transmitted to the heart from the older, instinctive limbic brain. The infant can experience these feelings of bliss in the womb prior to birth and in the very first few moments of being reconnected with the mother after birth, in close sensory contact with her touch, her voice, her smell, and her facial expression. And these sensory experiences continue throughout infancy. This original visceral experience can lay the foundation of later feelings of trust in life. The capacity for empathy and love, and the ability to feel joy, ecstasy, and delight. It is in the first minutes, hours, days, and months of an infant's life that the heart and the nervous system can be programmed to a fulfilled and happy life, or, conversely, to an anxiety-laden, difficult, and even tragic one. Abandonment by the mother, or her inability to love her child, are 2 of the greatest traumas an infant or small child can experience. Early adoption by loving foster parents can go far to diminish the effects of the grief and profound distress the infant feels. The current delays in the adoption process are disastrous for the instinctive needs of an infant who has been taken away from his mother and has no one to bond with. We now know that the fetus in the womb registers everything the mother is experiencing, her happiness and delight in her growing baby, or her fear and anxiety. We know that the development of the nervous system, the heart, and the developing cognitive functions of the brain can be positively or negatively affected by her serene or stressed state. We know the fetus can be affected by the quality of the mother's nutrition or lack of it, as well as by alcohol, smoking, and drugs, and also by tension and violence in the parental relationship. We know it is sensitive to music, loud noise, and the quality of the environment the mother is experiencing. We are born with 100 billion neurons in our brain, connected by 100 trillion synapses. This number may change as we learn more, and also more about the neurons in the heart. From 3 to 10 months, a culling takes place with the loss of 50,000 connections between brain cells every second. Cells that are not used during this time die. Every cell has several branchings of it called dendrons. The more the cells are used, the more connecting dendrons develop. They develop complexity and increase by use. The mother's empathic response to her infant in its early months and years is vital to the development of these dendrons. Care and bonding with the mother, or primary carer, helps the cells and dendrons to become active during the crucially important first 10 months. If care and love are absent or deficient, they will not be activated. The first 3 years of life are the most important for the future emotional and mental development of the child. Until the age of 3 to 5 years, the neural connections between the older limbic brain, the heart, and the frontal lobes of the neocortical brain are not fully established. Until then, we live through the reflexes of the limbic brain and through purely instinctual, unconscious behavior, assimilating sounds, sights, and encounters with people and our environment at a phenomenal rate. If there is insufficient verbal and sensory stimulus in these years, we will not be able to develop to the optimum level of which we are capable at birth. Our natural instinct is to reach out to people and respond to them, to explore through the senses everything that surrounds us. Between 3 and 5 years, the neocortical level of the brain and the frontal lobes become activated, and we begin to develop a sense of self and to differentiate between ourselves and our environment. The memories associated with the older brain during the earliest years gradually become unconscious. Yet, these earliest memories imprinted on the older brain and held in the limbic brain and the heart's memory field have immense power to influence our lives and our behavior. A wound to the instinct in these early years can affect our lives in negative ways to the end of our days, unless and until we become aware of them. Study after study has shown that emotional and physical abuse of the mother-to-be affects the neuronal circuits, nervous system of the child she is carrying, and that the abandonment, neglect, or abuse of the infant and small child can alter the balance of its neural chemistry and program it to depression or to violent and criminal behavior later on. It has been found that the brain and nervous system of children traumatized by their experience in a dysfunctional home exhibit the same patterns of functioning as those of war veterans suffering from PTSD. When constant anxiety and distress are experienced in infancy, the adrenal glands produce a high level of the stress hormone, cortisol, and this upsets or disturbs the optimal formation and equilibrium of the autonomic nervous system, the endocrine and immune systems, as well as interfering with the neural connections between the heart, the two hemispheres of the brain, and the frontal lobes. The higher brain centers may be unable to develop due to the stress of constant anxiety. The heart, as explained above, is the primal organ of the whole body-mind organism. When the heart is deeply distressed and cannot function in an optimal way, this affects the hormonal, immune, and autonomic nervous systems and all other organs of the body. Children who have been subjected to a chronically abusive environment grow up to be hyper-vigilant of other people's moods and body language as a protective measure. They sense changes in mood or a subtle inflection in the voice or body language long before others do. This hypervigilance affects every system in the body, programming it to live in a state of constant arousal and anxiety. Damage to the heart and the nervous system can endure throughout our lives, with no way of healing it if we are not aware of it. We need to ask whether the rise in violent crime, as well as the bullying and aggressive behavior that is increasingly apparent in our culture at all levels, does not in part originate in fetal and infant distress, contributing to the later disorientation and distress of the adolescent in a brutal and uncaring environment, and therefore to the arousal of the most aggressive survival instincts and the curtailment of the neocortical skills of emotional intelligence and the ability to contain and manage anger. As Camilla Batman-Galich, the founder of a charity called Kids Company and one of the few people in the UK who are really qualified to speak about this situation, says, the emotionally deprived children of the rich end up in rehab, the poor end up in prison. The increasing tendency to put infants and toddlers into nursery school at a very early age may have a negative effect on their emotional development because they are deprived of the unique emotional bonding experience with the mother. On the other hand, if the mother is incapable of bonding with her child, indifferent to or abusive of it, either from innate inadequacy or suffering from postnatal depression, nursery school may be a better alternative to a dysfunctional home environment. It has been noted recently that many small children enter nursery and primary school unable to speak or to interact with other children or adults because they have had hardly any personal interaction with their mothers at home, most probably because they are placed for hours in front of the television, or because they are simply left to cry alone or are cowed into silence by physical abuse. Memories of happiness and delight, or of terror, abandonment, anxiety, and grief, which are imprinted on the field of the heart and limbic brain in earliest infancy and early childhood, even in the womb, remain imprinted on them throughout our lives, and can affect the frontal lobes of the brain as these develop, whether positively or negatively. With the development of the frontal lobes comes the ability to reflect, to reason, to apply knowledge gained to specific goals, but also to develop the ideas conveyed by the imagination, to make intuitive connections between apparently unrelated things and ideas. But if the heart and the whole instinctual system connected with it are traumatized and deflected from a normal path of growth by the intense anxiety and fear aroused by neglect, abandonment, or abuse, this capacity for harmonious and balanced interaction between the heart, the nervous system, and the brain will be impaired. Nothing, therefore, in relation to the well-being and creativity of a whole society, is more important than the care of the mother and child, and the way a child is treated both at home and at school in its early years. This applies to all societies, however rich or poor. The neglect of instinctive needs. In most modern areas of the world, millions of us live in hideous, overcrowded cities. There are over 400 cities with populations greater than 1 million. We are no longer closely in touch as our ancestors were with the earth and the star-strewn night sky. This in itself does violence to our heart and our instincts. Children, through fear that they might be kidnapped or harmed by pedophiles, are not encouraged to play out of doors, to explore, take risks, and discover their power to survive. They sit for hours watching television or their computer screens. Millions of adults are dependent upon work which does not satisfy them, and from which there is no escape. Millions have no work, possibly for as long as 3 generations, and live on state benefits. With the doubling and tripling of the world population over the last 50 years, this situation has been made incomparably worse, because even with a flourishing economy, there can never be enough employment for all the growing numbers who are seeking it, particularly for the young. Political leaders are slow to comprehend that the planet's resources are limited, and there cannot be perpetual increase of the world's population, economic growth, or jobs. The breakdown of families, which is in part an effect of this alienation from the instinct, contributes to patterns of behavior which reflect its distress and disorientation. There is nothing in secular society to give a foundation for values which respect the needs of the instinct. Boys without a male role model, provided by a caring father, turn to gangs to give them security, structure, and status. Girls follow the role models offered to them by media celebrities, forcing a premature development of sexual awareness, and adapt their feminine nature to the masculine ethos and goals of the culture. An exaggerated focus on sexuality distorts the need for love and trust in relationships. Men and women come to view each other in terms of immediate gratification, to be discarded if their partner fails to meet their requirements. Children, the precious repository of our future, become the unhappy victims of the serial relationships with their parents, and targets not only for pedophiles, but for commercial exploitation and online cyberbullying. The appalling treatment and neglect of children taken into care has just come to light in the United Kingdom. Mothers may be too stressed and exhausted by the combined demands of full-time work and running a home to attend to their children's emotional needs and to the relationship with their partners. The current benefit system in the UK, which has encouraged young women to become mothers without the desire or the need to find a supportive and caring partner, has led to the situation where 1 in 3 children, 3.8 million, in the United Kingdom now live without a father. 50,000 births are registered annually without the father's name on the birth certificate. This situation might be ameliorated if adolescents were helped to understand the responsibilities of parenthood and why a child's need for the loving care of both parents is paramount. The most important factor in the education of children in kindergarten and primary school is to nourish the imagination with activities that put them in touch with nature and help to connect them with their instincts. Exploring the woods and learning about birds and animals, learning how to grow vegetables, painting, dancing, singing, carpentry, cooking, and learning to play a musical instrument, as thousands of children in the poorest cities of Venezuela are doing, would go far to help children acquire confidence and balance, and above all, to enjoy learning. Too much emphasis on exam-focused, left-hemispheric learning without the balancing focus on activities which nurture the imagination and involve the coordination of eye, heart, and hand, can cripple the instincts and the heart. By providing children with the conditions in which they can develop and express their natural instinct to enjoy what they are learning, or by failing to notice the boredom and discouragement inflicted on them by bad teachers and inadequate perfunctory education, we can profoundly affect their future. The best teachers know all this and can inspire and encourage a child to discover his or her creative path in life. The worst, like the worst parents, can crush and destroy a child's soul. The distress children feel, distress caused not only by inadequate education and bullying in schools, but by parental quarreling and separation, is often expressed in physical symptoms such as abdominal pain. When they are very young, they can only articulate what they are feeling through physical symptoms. Such distress leaves traumas embedded in the nervous system. As these young people grow to adulthood, many turn to drugs or alcohol, or fall into depression and a kind of paralysis. Not knowing how to deal with their distress, they are driven from day to day by a sense of failure because of their inability to attain the goals and material benefits which our competitive culture urges on them. Governments try to deal with the symptoms of this distress, manifested not only in crime but in diseases such as cancer and diabetes, as well as depression and mental illness, and the obesity that affects 1/3 of the population in the United Kingdom. Nearly 46 million prescriptions for antidepressants were dispensed in 2011, an increase of 9% over the previous year. A recent survey from the Institute of Clinical Psychology and Psychotherapy in Dresden, 2011, reports that 30 million people in 30 European countries suffer from depression, and that more than 1/3 of the population in these countries suffer from mental disorders, with only 1/4 of these receiving help. But the billions spent on health do not address, and therefore cannot alleviate, the underlying problem of the quality of care infants and young children receive in an overcrowded and dysfunctional society. Because the superficial values which dominate the media do not address our real needs, and because their very superficiality cuts us off from the connection to our deepest ground, they draw us into addictive patterns which can destroy lives, health, and relationships. The tragic fate of the gifted singer Amy Winehouse is one example of this. Reconnecting with the body. The body experiences life through the 5 senses. Taking the time to become acutely aware of sensory experience is a form of meditation. It puts us in touch with the body and the rhythm of our breathing and our heart. It helps us to slow down, to become aware of everything around us that is communicating its presence to us. We don't think of the past or the future. We are in the present. Breathing more freely helps us to let go of the need to do anything. Taking time to lie on our back on the ground or the floor for a few minutes during the day, or perhaps in our bed when we wake up in the morning, gives us time to listen to our breathing, to be in touch with our earthly home, to reconnect with our instinctual soul. As children, we once had this connection to the body. We had it unconsciously, instinctively. We moved freely, joyously, without thinking what we were doing, expressing every thought and feeling in physical movement. We loved running, jumping, exploring, shouting to each other, feeling the soft rain or the warm sun on our skin, in touch with the aliveness of the earth, the plants and the trees, stroking the softness of an animal's fur, feeling the rapture of being alive. As we grow up and are taught to conform to the expectations of parents, teachers, and society in general, we lose that instinctive physicality and spontaneous emotional freedom of early childhood. As we learn to conform, our breathing becomes more constricted, and parts of our body, usually our spine and our neck, become more tense. This process gradually develops into the rigidity of adulthood, where we sit, stand, and move in a certain habitual way. It also explains why almost any form of bodywork involving breathing and/or muscle relaxation can release emotion and energy that have been suppressed and locked into the body, sometimes for as long as 30 or 40 years. Fortunately, many healing methods exist today for releasing this tension and rediscovering our ability to feel connected to our body. In the words of a man who learned a method of deep massage from the kahuna shamans of Hawaii and teaches a method of reconnection with the body, the more fully physically present we become, the more we are aware of subtle flows of energy in our body. We begin to sense that the body is a conduit between heaven and earth, which is perhaps its deepest purpose and function. If we can rediscover this connection to our bodies, perhaps remembering a long time ago when we did feel that connection, when swimming or skiing, walking in the woods, by the sea, or breathing in the astonishing clear air of mountains, we gain a deep experience of being at home in ourselves, an aliveness and a sense of safety, security, happiness, and well-being. This feeling communicates itself to other people who feel safe in our presence and more in touch with their own bodies. Often people find that their best ideas come to them when they are walking, swimming, lying in the bath, or feeling the water of the shower cascading down their bodies. Water seems to activate the imagination. Although we may not immediately recover the sense of connection with the earth and the cosmos that shamanic people had and still have, we can begin to open our senses to that awareness. A beautiful passage from the Irish Carmina Gadelica reminds us of the relationship with nature that we have lost and could recover. The old people had runes which they sang to the spirits dwelling in the sea and in the mountain, in the wind and in the whirlwind, in the lightning and in the thunder, in the sea and in the moon and in the stars of heaven. Singing reminds me of the remarkable hidden powers of the body discovered in the art of Mongolian overtone chanting and introduced in many workshops all over the world by Jill Peirce. It is a thrilling experience to find that we can make these wonderful sounds, even people who have never been able to sing. This is a shamanic art, and it is now available to anyone who chooses to learn it. It would be wonderful if all children could be taught Mongolian chanting in schools, giving them a common bond, a shared skill, and the excitement of discovering the wondrous sound their bodies can make. Healing the heart.
As the relationship with the ground of life changes, so do we change in our relationships to partner, child, or parent. Our understanding of life and other people deepens and expands. Over the course of many years of attending to the voice of our heart, the base metal of a personality which was unaware of the numinous ground on which it rests, or the source of the light which gives it life, is transformed into gold as it learns how to engage with this ground as with an invisible partner and friend. Aspects of our psychic life which may, in our unconsciousness, have controlled our lives and our relationships are slowly transformed as our relationship with this deep instinctive ground of our soul grows and develops. Following the guidance of the heart may lead us in unexpected directions in our lives. Instinct carries with it the active intelligence, the intention, and the power to transform these unconscious patterns so that humanity can reach its evolutionary goal of a mature, transformed, and integrated consciousness. This instinctual soul, focused through the heart and connected to the greater cosmic web of life, is the taproot of our imagination and our creativity.
The main initiatives which could assist the well-being of the child. Teaching children the clinical facts of sexual intercourse through using a book like Nilsson's A Child is Born, instead of a banana and a condom, might instill a sense of wonder and respect for sexuality, conception, and childbirth, instead of approaching these in a mechanistic way. Teaching adolescents and parents to be the importance of good nutrition for both parents before the conception of their child, as well as during its growth in the womb, is essential. This should be recognized as part of the preparation for parenthood and doesn't receive nearly enough attention. Plenty of protein, fresh fruit and vegetables are vitally important. Abstaining from alcohol, drugs and antidepressants is also important. It is also vital that both parents take an omega-3 fish oil supplement or eat fish because our diet lacks fish. It is as important as taking a folic acid supplement to prevent spina bifida. Increasing the number of midwives so that mothers could receive really good supportive care during pregnancy and childbirth would help to counter the fear of childbirth and the suffering and fear of mothers left too long unattended. The process of birth has become perfunctory, uncaring, and mechanical because of the chronic lack of midwives. This need for care extends to more training in recognizing and treating postnatal depression, which can be greatly helped by taking omega-3 supplements and receiving hormonal treatment as a possible alternative to antidepressants. Educating children and adolescents to take responsibility for their future sexual relationships, teaching them about responsible parenthood and the physical and emotional needs of their child should be part of the school curriculum. One of the facts that could be imparted to them is that the excessive consumption of alcohol, binge drinking, in their teens and 20s harms the immune system not only of their children, but also their grandchildren.
As we begin to pay attention to our inner life, it becomes apparent that there is an intelligence in its depths that is infinitely superior to our conscious ego or personality. In relation to this greater intelligence, the surface personality is like a tiny planet compared to the size and power of a supernova. If these initiatives were implemented, an enormous amount of mental and physical illness could be avoided, and the billions expended on healthcare reduced. If young men and women were told these basic facts about parenthood during their adolescence, and in addition shown the damaging effects that drinking to excess and taking drugs have on the immune system of their children, and even their grandchildren, leading to physical and mental illness, much suffering and disease could be prevented. They would become more aware of the responsibility of becoming a parent. They might take more care in choosing a partner who would be a good mother or father to their children, and more care of their health before embarking on parenthood.